King's College, Cambridge, the small set of Bachelor Fellows rooms at the northwest corner of the Fellows Building under the chestnut tree at the riverside, the 14th day of August in the year of our Lord, 1819. Written by my own hand at the small Fellows writing table in the warm late summer Cambridge afternoon light in the 78th year of my age, in a small steady decline that Dr. Heathcote of Trumpington Street has set out for me in plain country terms. To Miss Cecilia Radcliffe, only surviving daughter of my late dear pupil, the Reverend Augustine Radcliffe of Trinity Hall, 1786 to 1790, lately of St. Peter at the Fen, Lincoln, and my goddaughter at the parish font of the said St. Peter at the Fen, on the small clear Sunday morning of the 12th of May, 1793, of which baptism I have kept the small Greek-bound parish register copy at the foot of this letter. My dear young lady, it is the small privilege of an old college bachelor of 77 years, kept these 21 months at the Fellows' Rooms by Dr. Heathcote's gentle instructions, to write at last the letter he has kept in his Greek-bound box at the chestnut window for the long 12-month past. I have not, in your 26 years, come over to the parsonage at St. Peter at the Fen to make my warm acquaintance with you, my dear. The fault is the small one of a college bachelor of the older Cambridge fashion, who has kept his rooms at the chestnut window and his Greek folios at the long oak table, and has let the years pass at the small, slow Cambridge pace. Your dear late father was the small candle of my classics class of 1788, and the small Trinity Hall pupil of my warm regard at the Trinity vacations of 1787 and 1789, and your warm small mother, Mrs. Elspeth Radcliffe, née Walpole, was the small Lincolnshire candle whose letters at the Cambridge post I have kept these years past. I leave you, my dear, by the will Mr. Geoffrey Glenister of Lincoln's Inn has lately drawn up at this chestnut window, the dwelling house called Bramwell House at Westwold in the Fen, with its small Fenland pasture of 198 acres, the small library of 298 volumes, the Bramwell family plate of 78 pieces, and the further sum of £5,200 in the 3% consolidated annuities at the Bank of England. I ask no kindness of you in return, my dear. I ask only that you think of Bramwell as your own, and of the small Cambridge bachelor, who has at last had the small warm courage to tell you so. Hugh Bramwell, Fellow of King's College, Cambridge, written at the chestnut window this 14th day of August 1819. The letter lay open upon the green baize at the parlour writing table in Mrs. Hatherton's reading school in Lincoln. The cool, clear, pale yellow Wednesday afternoon of the 24th of November 1819 stood at the leaded west window. Miss Cecilia Radcliffe had broken the sealed packet at the Red King's College wax not 5 minutes past, the Lilian Crown impression cracked clean across by the ivory paper knife her late mother had kept at Augustine Radcliffe's writing table at the Fen parsonage, Mr. Geoffrey Glenister's covering professional note from Lincoln's Inn, folded in red Lincoln's Inn wax and addressed in his thin, careful hand, lay at her right under a pewter inkstand. She sat very upright in the schoolmistress's straight-backed chair. She was gentle upright of figure, an inch over 5'5", her soft, warm chestnut hair pinned smooth at the nape under a plain net. Her careful hazel eyes, the colour of a Lincolnshire fen reed at the autumn close, rested upon the second page of Dr. Bramwell's letter. Her fair, fine indoor skin held the pale of a long school week's lamp reading. Her oval face, of warm, careful composition, kept the gentle, firm mouth she had carried from her father's parsonage at 26. The plum and cream half-morning gown for Augustine Radcliffe was clean at the white linen collar, the cuffs turned back once at the writing hand, the jet brooch at her throat, the one her mother Elspeth had worn at the Walpole wedding in 1789. She was the only surviving daughter of the Reverend Augustine Radcliffe, curate of St. Peter at the Fen on the Lincoln-Sleaford Road from 1796 to his death in the autumn of 1817, and of Mrs. Elspeth Radcliffe, née Walpole of Bourne in Lincolnshire. She had been born at the parsonage on the 11th of May, 1793, baptised at the parish font on the clear Sunday morning of the 12th. Dr. Hugh Bramwell named her godfather in the register in her father's careful hand. Her mother had died of a spring fever in early March 1812, when Cecilia was 19 and reading the Greek primer at her father's elbow in the south study. Her father had died of an autumn fever in late October 1817, when Cecilia was 24 and keeping the parish accounts for him. The parsonage living had reverted to the patron at All Saints 1817. The Reverend Augustine Radcliffe had left an estate of £270 and a Greek library of 140 volumes, and his only surviving daughter had come up to Lincoln on the Sleaford carrier's cart on the 11th of November 1817 to take the post of teacher of reading and writing at Mrs. Hatherton's reading school for the daughters of Lincoln tradesmen. She had been in the schoolroom these 22 months, at a salary of £42 the year, and her lodging at Mrs. Hatherton's south parlour above the schoolroom. She had not seen her godfather, Dr. Bramwell, since her baptism at the Fen parsonage in May 1793. She had received from him every quarter-day, by the Cambridge post, a neat brown paper packet containing a single Greek folio leaf, carefully scribed in his italic hand, with the gentle greeting, "For my goddaughter at the Fen at the foot." She had kept the 86 leaves in a mahogany tea-caddy at the top of her writing-table. She had written to him at King's, at the Lincolnshire quarter-days, in her gentle, firm hand, thanking him for the leaf and acquainting him with her father's parish and her mother's keeping. The Cambridge bachelor had not come down to the Fen parsonage in her 26 years, and Cecilia had not in her gentle way held the absence against him. She read the letter through once at the writing-table, and then she read it through a second time. The cool, pale yellow Lincolnshire afternoon kept at the leaded west window. The parlour clock at the south mantel struck the 3:15. She held the letter against her breastbone for one warm, careful moment, and then set it gentle upon the green baize at the writing-table. She did not weep. She drew one mild, even breath at the parlour writing-table at the cool Lincolnshire November afternoon. Then she took up Mr. Glenister's covering professional note. The Lincoln's Inn solicitor's note was a single half-sheet, folded in red wax, in a thin, careful, old square hand, dated the 22nd of November, 1819, at No. 8 Old Square, Lincoln's Inn. In it, Mr. Glenister acquainted Cecilia with the death of Dr. Hugh Bramwell at his college rooms in the Fellows Building on Saturday the 6th of November, 1819, at the close of a long autumnal decline, in the 78th year of his age, and attended at the last by Dr. Heathcote of Trumpington Street and by Dr. Bramwell's gyp of 39 years. The will of the 14th of August, witnessed at King's by Mr. Glenister himself, by his managing clerk, Mr. Bridges, and by the Provost of King's College, Cambridge, had been proved at Doctors' Commons in London on Friday the 19th of November. Mr. Glenister required Cecilia's attendance at his chambers at No. 8 Old Square, Lincoln's Inn, at 10:30 of the morning of Wednesday the 8th of December, 1819, for the formal reading of the will and the assignment of the keys of Bramwell House at Westwold in the Fen. Cecilia laid the covering note beside the testamentary letter on the green baize. She kept her gentle, firm hands folded at the edge of the writing-table. The parlour clock struck the 3:30. She sat at the writing-table for a long, mild quarter-hour, looking at the leaded west window where the cool, clear Lincolnshire November sky kept the warm, pale yellow of the late afternoon. She thought of her father at the south study at the Fen parsonage in the autumn of 1817, and of her mother at the South Parlour at Bourne in the spring of 1812, she thought of the Cambridge bachelor of 77 at his chestnut window at the Fellows Building, writing this letter to her in the warm, late summer light of the 14th of August. She did not weep. At 5 of the clock, Mrs. Hatherton came in from the schoolroom at the close of the Wednesday afternoon reading class. Mrs. Hatherton was a soft, sturdy widow of 62, an inch under 5'5", with soft, silver-grey hair beneath a fine lace cap, warm, pale blue eyes, an upright, kind carriage, and a slate-blue silk half-mourning gown for her late husband, Mr. Hatherton, gentleman of Cambridge, who had died of a chest decline in February 1815. She had kept the reading school for the daughters of Lincoln tradesmen these 21 years. "My dear Miss Radcliffe," said Mrs. Hatherton, coming at the parlour fire with a warm look at Cecilia's writing table, "the Tregony girl has read her Bunyan very prettily, and the Bourne girls have set their copybooks neat for the week. You have a letter, my dear." "I have 2 letters, ma'am," said Cecilia in her gentle, firm voice. "I should be glad if you would read them at the parlour fire." She gave Mrs. Hatherton first the covering professional note from Mr. Glenister, and then the long testamentary letter from Dr. Bramwell. Mrs. Hatherton took the gold-rimmed reading spectacles from the carved walnut work-box at the fireside and put them on at the bridge of her warm Lincolnshire nose. She sat at the parlour fire in her slate-blue silk and read the Cambridge letter through with the soft, motherly attention she had given Cecilia these 22 months at the schoolroom. When she had finished, she folded the letter at the original creases and laid it on the green baize. She looked at Cecilia in warm, kind, motherly gravity. "My dear Cecilia," said Mrs. Hatherton, "it is a very tender letter. I have not heard a kinder Cambridge bachelor speak in print these many years." "It is, ma'am," said Cecilia, gentle. "My late dear Mr. Hatherton," said Mrs. Hatherton, taking off her reading spectacles and laying them at her knee in the slate-blue silk, was at Trinity Hall under Dr. Hugh Bramwell's tutorship in classics in the Cambridge years of 1786, 1787, 1788, and 1789, my dear, in the same Trinity Hall class as your dear late father, the Reverend Augustine Radcliffe. He had often spoken to me at our Cambridge parlour at the close of an evening of Dr. Bramwell's kind grey eyes at the Greek seminar in the Fellows Building at King's, and of the chestnut window and the long oak table at the bachelor's rooms, and of the warm, careful regard the old fellow bore his Trinity Hall pupils. Your dear father, my dear, was the candle of that class, as Dr. Bramwell has said in his own letter, and my dear Mr. Hatherton was the second candle. The Cambridge connection squares very gentle, my love. Cecilia, sitting at her writing table by the leaded west window, drew one mild, even breath. Her careful hazel eyes rested a moment upon Mrs. Hatherton's warm, pale blue ones at the parlour fire. "I am glad of the Cambridge connection, ma'am," she said, gentle. "You shall go down to Lincoln's Inn on the 8th, said Mrs. Hatherton in warm, kind firmness. "You shall take the reading class through this last week at the schoolroom, and we shall write to the 3 school families this very evening, my dear, for the 6 weeks' notice that is the custom of the school. And I shall write a private note to my Cambridge cousin, Mrs. Holbrook, at the close of the week, not a word, my dear, until the will is read, that she may know to expect you at Lincoln's Inn the Tuesday se'nnight." "You are very gracious, ma'am," said Cecilia. "My dear," said Mrs. Hatherton, taking Cecilia's gentle, firm hand in her warm Lincolnshire one at the parlour fire. "The Cambridge bachelor has thought of you these 26 years at his chestnut window. It is a warm kindness of God's economy that he has thought of you at the last to such a tender purpose. Bramwell House at Westwold in the Fen is a brick and pantile Fenland house of the 7th year of the 2nd George, my dear. My late Mr. Hatherton had seen it once from the Spalding-Bourne Road in the August of 1788. It is a gentle house. Cecilia inclined her head once gentle at the parlour fire. The cool, clear, pale yellow Lincolnshire November afternoon kept at the leaded west window. The parlour clock struck the 5:15. On the Saturday following, the 27th of November 1819, a cool, mild Lincolnshire morning of pale yellow sky over the cathedral close, Cecilia sat at the parlour writing table from 9 of the clock to 1. She wrote 3 letters in her gentle, firm Lincolnshire hand. The first was to Mr. Glenister at No. 8 Old Square, Lincoln's Inn. In it she acquainted him of her warm, careful receipt of his covering note of the 22nd instant, and of Dr. Bramwell's testamentary letter of the 14th of August. She confirmed her attendance at his chambers at 10:30 of Wednesday the 8th of December, and she begged him to convey to the Provost of Kings her warm, careful thanks for the kind office in the forwarding of the Cambridge packet. She sealed the folded sheet in red wax with her late father's Radcliffe seal, a heron and an open book, a Lincolnshire fen device of the elder Radcliffes, and set the letter on the pewter tray at the south mantel for the Lincoln post. The second was a careful private letter to each of Mrs. Hatherton's 3 school families at Lincoln: the Tregony family at the drapery in the High Street, the Spalding family at the saddlery in the Bailgate, and the Bourne family at the ironmonger's in the Bargate. In each, Cecilia acquainted the family of her required leaving of the reading school at the close of the present term, gave the 6 weeks' notice that was the school's custom, and undertook to deliver the daughter's copybook and reading Bible at the close of the Tuesday class of the 7th of December. The third was to her late father's only sister, Mrs. Caroline Walpole, lately of Bourne, of 56, and lately widowed of the Bourne attorney, Mr. Walpole. To her Aunt Cecilia wrote at greater length. She set down the history of the Cambridge letter and the covering Lincoln's Inn note, acquainted her aunt of Dr. Bramwell's careful bequest at Westwold in the Fen, and begged her company at the London journey of the 8th, that the two might travel down together from Lincoln by the Boston Mail and lodge for the night at Mrs. Holbrook's in Bedford Row. Cecilia took the 3 letters at 1 of the clock to the pewter tray at the south mantel, set them in the careful order: Glenister, Tregony, Spalding, Bourne, Walpole, and went down at the 1:30 to the Saturday dinner Mrs. Hatherton kept with the Lincoln mutton pie and the parsnip and carrot. The Sunday following, the 28th of November 1819, Cecilia and Mrs. Hatherton walked the Bailgate down to the parish church of St. Mary le Wigford at the lower end of the Lincoln High Street. The cool, clear, pale yellow Lincolnshire November morning kept over the cathedral close and the Roman arch in the south wall. The bells of St. Mary le Wigford rang out the 11:15 as the two came in at the south porch. Cecilia took her place in the schoolmistress's pew at the north transept that Mrs. Hatherton had kept for her these 22 months. She wore the plum and cream half-morning gown with the clean white linen collar, the jet brooch at her throat, and the black silk bonnet with the plum ribbon. She kept her gentle, firm hands folded at the leather prayer book her late mother, Elspeth Radcliffe, had carried at Bourne in the spring of 1812. The Reverend Mr. Calvley, vicar of St. Mary le Wigford, these 21 years, read the morning office in his careful Lincolnshire diction. The parish congregation knew nothing yet of the Cambridge letter at Mrs. Hatherton's south parlour. Cecilia made the responses in her gentle, firm voice. At the close of the office, she came out at the south porch with Mrs. Hatherton, gave the warm, careful word of thanks to Mr. Calvley at the parish door, and walked the Bailgate up to the schoolroom in warm, gentle Lincolnshire composure. On the Monday morning of the 29th of November, Cecilia opened the reading class at 9. There were 7 Lincoln village girls in the class, the 2 Tregony girls, the 2 Spalding girls, 2 of the Bourne girls, and the Holbeach girl. They read at her gentle, firm direction from Mrs. Trimmer's Sacred History for 1 hour, and from the First Reading Bible for 1 hour, and they set their copybooks at the long oak schoolroom table for 1 hour. The morning kept the cool, clear, pale yellow Lincolnshire November weather. On the Tuesday afternoon, the 30th of November, Cecilia gave the reading class to the 7 Lincoln Village girls for the last time. She kept her gentle, firm voice at the long oak schoolroom table. She heard each of the 7 read aloud from the first reading Bible in turn, and she set each girl's copybook in careful Lincolnshire order. At the close of the class, she did not speak of the leaving, nor of the Cambridge letter, nor of Bramwell House. On the Wednesday afternoon, the 1st of December, the 7 Lincoln Village girls came in at 2 of the clock with the Lincolnshire Wildflower album the 2 Tregony girls had stitched at the drapery these last 3 weeks past. The Wildflower album was a neat quarto in the soft plum half-calf of the Lincoln binder, Mr. Eshelby, with the careful gilt lettering to Miss Radcliffe from her Lincoln reading class, 1st December 1819, at the front cover. Inside, the 7 girls had pressed in their warm, careful Lincolnshire hands the Fenland wildflowers of the late autumn, the soft, pale meadow saffron of the Wigford meadow, the marsh violet, the late harebell, the bog asphodel, the pale fen thistle, the ragged robin, the late lady's bedstraw, the fen mint, and each dried flower was named beneath in the careful, round Lincolnshire schoolroom hand. Cecilia took the Wildflower album in her gentle, firm hands at the long oak schoolroom table. She looked at the 7 warm Lincoln Village faces of her reading class. She thanked them in her gentle, firm voice for the warm, careful kindness of the album, and she promised each girl by name that she would think of her at the fen pasture at Bramwell House. The Holbeach girl, who was 9 years old and very gentle, came forward and put her fen-tanned hand in Cecilia's. Cecilia kept the hand a warm, careful moment, and gave it gentle back. She did not weep. The Tuesday evening of the 7th of December came on cool and clear over the Bailgate at Lincoln. The Lincolnshire November had given over to the cold, pale yellow of an early December, and Mrs. Hatherton's south parlour had a soft coal fire at the south hearth. Cecilia's 2 corded leather trunks stood in the south hall under the lamp at the foot of the schoolroom stair. The dressing case of her late mother Elspeth, in the dark Russia leather with the brass Walpole monogram, stood at the top of the larger trunk. Folded in the inner pocket of the dressing case, in a clean fold of white tissue, lay Dr. Hugh Bramwell's testamentary letter at the broken Red King's College wax. Cecilia sat at the parlour writing table by the leaded west window in gentle, warm Lincolnshire composure. She had taken off the schoolmistress's straight Lincolnshire cuffs, and she wore the plum and cream half-morning gown with the jet brooch at the throat and the white linen collar very clean at the neck. Her soft, warm chestnut hair was pinned smooth at the nape. Her careful hazel eyes rested upon the leaded west window, where the cool, clear, pale yellow Lincolnshire night kept beyond the south Bailgate roofs. Mrs. Hatherton's letter to Mrs. Holbrook at Bedford Row had been answered by the Tuesday post. The lodging would be ready for Cecilia and her aunt at the close of Wednesday afternoon, the supper set at the 6:30. Cecilia's aunt, Mrs. Walpole, had come over from Bourne by the carrier on Monday the 6th. She was a kind, upright Lincolnshire widow, in soft slate-grey silk, half-mourning, with warm, pale blue eyes and soft iron-grey hair beneath a clean lace cap. She had taken the second bedchamber at the south parlour for the Monday and Tuesday nights, and would travel with Cecilia to London by the Boston mail at the 6:30 of the Wednesday morning. Cecilia drew one mild, even breath at the leaded west window. She looked at the south hall where the corded leather trunks stood in the lamplight, and at the soft coal fire at the south hearth where Mrs. Hatherton and Mrs. Walpole sat at the parlour fender with the mulled wine. She thought of the reading class at the schoolroom, of the Holbeach girl's fen-tanned hand at the long oak table that Wednesday afternoon, and she thought of the Lincolnshire Wildflower album, folded in the larger trunk, between her plum and cream Sunday gown and her warm grey morning cloak. She thought of Dr. Bramwell at his chestnut window in the warm late summer Cambridge afternoon of the 14th of August. She thought of her late father in the south study at the Fen parsonage and her mother at the parlour at Bourne. She thought of Mr. Glenister at his chambers at Old Square, where the Wednesday morning would find her at 10:30. The parlour clock struck the 9:30. Cecilia rose gentle from the writing-table, took up the soft, warm cashmere shawl her Aunt Mrs. Walpole had brought her from Bourne, and went over to the parlour fire to sit with Mrs. Hatherton and Mrs. Walpole at the soft coal hearth. The cool, clear, pale yellow Lincolnshire night kept beyond the leaded west window. The morning would take her to Lincoln's Inn. The Wednesday morning of the 8th of December, 1819, came in over the London chimney-tops in a cool, pale yellow winter light, mild for the season, with a soft frost gentling the slates above Carey Street. Mrs. Bromhead's lodging-house, where Cecilia and her aunt had alighted from the post-chaise on the Tuesday evening at a little past 7, kept the second house on the south side, a narrow brick house of 4 windows, the door painted a soft, mellow Lincoln green. The two had come up from Lincoln on the Tuesday by a hired post-chaise, leaving Mrs. Hatherton's south door at the Bailgate at 6:30 of the Monday evening, taking the long Tuesday at the road, and coming in at Mrs. Bromhead's south door in the soft dark of the Tuesday evening. Mrs. Walpole was a kind, upright Lincolnshire widow of 56 in soft amber silk, half-mourning under a white lace fichu, her soft silver-grey hair beneath a fine lace cap, her warm hazel eyes very gentle at the lamplight, an inch over 5'4". She had borne the long journey with the kind born patience that was her custom, and slept well at her south chamber. Cecilia, who had slept lightly in the strange first night of a London chamber, was at the parlour writing-table by 8:15 with her bread and butter and warm tea at her hand. She wore the plum and cream half-morning gown with the white linen collar, and a clean cuff turned back at the writing hand. Her warm chestnut hair was pinned smooth at the nape. Her hazel eyes rested gentle at the parlour window, where the cool morning lay over the iron railings. Mrs. Walpole came in at the parlour door at 9:15 in her soft amber silk, and took the second chair at the fire. "My dear Cecilia," she said in her warm Lincolnshire voice, "you are at the writing-table very early, my love." "I am, ma'am," said Cecilia gentle. "Mr. Glenister's chambers are not above 5 minutes' walk to the New Square gate. I shall set out at 10, and not before. Then sit at the fire a while with me, my dear. The London chimney-tops will not run away." Cecilia smiled the warm, gentle smile her mother had worn at the Bourne parlour at 6:20, and came from the writing-table to the parlour fender. The mahogany mantel clock kept the warm hour. The two sat in soft, kind company at the coal fire until the 9:45. At 10, or a careful 3 minutes past, Cecilia put on the soft grey morning cloak with the white squirrel collar her aunt had pressed upon her at Bourne, her black silk bonnet with the plum ribbon, and her plum grey kid gloves. She took up the soft grey silk reticule that held Dr. Bramwell's testamentary letter folded clean, Mr. Glenister's covering note, and a careful ivory-leaved memorandum book. "I shall be back, ma'am, at noon or a little after," she said at the door. "I shall keep the fire warm against you, my dear," said her aunt, and kissed her on the warm brow. Mrs. Bromhead, who was a tall, thin London widow in clean black bombazine, kept the south door open at Cecilia's coming down. The cool, pale yellow morning had not deepened since the breakfast hour. Cecilia walked the south side of Carey Street at a gentle, even pace, the soft frost yielding under her Lincolnshire half-boots, and came at the gate of Lincoln's Inn at 6 minutes past 10. The porter touched his hat at her name, and waved her through to Old Square by the South Passage. She came at the south side at the 5:10 and stood a careful warm moment at the iron railings before the door of number 8. The house was a tall, narrow brick of 4 stories, the green-painted door with a clean brass plate at the right. A young clerk in a worn brown coat rang the bell, and Cecilia was shown up the polished oak stair to the first-floor chamber that gave on to the square. Mr. Geoffrey Glenister rose from his writing table at her coming in. He was a thin, upright man of 60, an inch over 5'11", with thinning silver-grey hair carefully combed back, kind grey eyes behind small gold-rimmed spectacles, fair indoor pallor, a long, warm scholar's face clean-shaven, and a soft, gentle stoop at the table. He wore plain black, superfine of an older London cut, with a clean white linen stock and a mourning band of crape at the upper left sleeve for Dr. Bramwell. The chamber was a kind, warm one of brown wainscot, with a south window upon the square, a long oak writing table laid clean with 3 folded papers, 2 ladder-back chairs, a coal fire at the hearth, and a long case clock by the inner door. "Miss Radcliffe," said Mr. Glenister in his warm, kind voice, coming round the table to hand her to the chair at the south window. "I am very glad to see you safe in London. Pray sit, my dear, and we shall come at the will at our gentle leisure." "You are very kind, sir," said Cecilia Gentle, taking the chair he gave. The young clerk had withdrawn. Mr. Glenister took up the engrossed copy of the will and laid it gentle at the green baize before him. "I shall read the will through to you in the slow Lincoln's Inn fashion, Miss Radcliffe, and you shall stop me at any sentence that is dark to you. The instrument is short, my dear, and there is no rough English in it. It was drawn at King's by my own hand in the warm August afternoon, at the chestnut window above the river, with Dr. Bramwell sitting at my elbow in his college gown." Cecilia inclined her head gentle. The coal fire kept warm at the hearth. Mr. Glenister put the gold-rimmed reading spectacles upon the bridge of his long, warm scholar's nose, and read the will aloud in his warm, careful diction, the preamble in the formal English style, the appointment of himself as sole executor, the warm bequests by name and by years of service to Mr. Yelverton, Mrs. Inchbald, Mrs. German, and Mr. Glendower of the household, the King's College legacies of 2 folio sets of Greek classics to the college library, the gentle provision for the old gyp. Then the residuary bequest, in a slower and more careful warmth, "And I give and devise the dwelling house called Bramwell House at Westwold in the Fen, with the home pasture being 198 acres, the 298 volumes of the South Library, the Bramwell family plate of 78 pieces, and the further sum of £5,200 in the 3% consols, unto Miss Cecilia Radcliffe, my dear goddaughter, for her own use absolutely." He paused and looked over the gold rims. Then he read the witness line. "In witness whereof the said Hugh Bramwell has set his hand and seal this 14th day of August 1819, in the presence of us, Geoffrey Glenister, solicitor, Henry Bridges, clerk, the provost of King's College, Cambridge." Cecilia drew one mild, even breath at the south window. "It is very gentle in its English, sir," she said gentle. "It is, my dear," said Mr. Glenister, and took the spectacles down to his knee. "Dr. Bramwell read me each clause through in his old Cambridge voice on the afternoon of the 14th, with the warm, late summer light coming in over the river. He signed at the long oak table. The provost came down from the lodging to set his name. My clerk set his at the same quarter, and I set mine after. The will was sealed in red king's wax before evening. He went gentle through the long Cambridge autumn. Dr. Bramwell had borne the late summer and autumn at his chestnut window in a soft, slow decline, kept up by his Cambridge physician with the gentle attendance of a country man. He had died on the Saturday morning of the 6th of November, in the 78th year of his age, very gentle at the last, with his old jip at the bedside and the chestnut bough at the river window. The will had been proved in London on the Friday of the 19th, the probate coming down in clean parchment to the chambers on the Monday morning following. "I have here for you, my dear," said Mr. Glenister in warm, kind gravity, "4 things." He took them in their turn from a mahogany box at the corner of the table. "This first is the engrossed copy of the will in fair copy, with my own attestation at the foot. You shall keep it at Bramwell at your writing desk." He laid the folded copy in her warm hand. "This second is the bank draft for £5,200 upon your London bankers." He laid the draft beside the copy. "This third is the set of keys to Bramwell House, kept these 7 weeks at this box by my own hand. The great south door, the south library, the south pantry where the family plate is kept, and the north wing door at the kitchen garden." He laid the brass ring of 4 keys, very gentle, into Cecilia's hand. "And this 4th, my dear, is the address of the Reverend Octavius Fanshawe, vicar at Westwold in the Fen, presented to the living by Dr. Bramwell in 1814. He has had my note of the will the Friday last. You shall write to him at your gentle leisure from the South Library." Cecilia kept the 4 things gentle in her warm hands. She did not weep. She drew one mild breath at the warm coal hearth. "Mr. Glenister, sir," she said gentle, "I am very sensible of the warm kindness of your office. I shall write to you from Bramwell at the close of the 1st week, that you may know how the household has received me." "I shall be very glad of your warm Fenland note, my dear," said Mr. Glenister, taking her hand gentle a careful moment. "Dr. Bramwell thought of you these 26 years at the chestnut window. He has left you the Bramwell house with the warm hand of a man who was settled in his last gentle love." Cecilia inclined her head. The clock kept the 11:15. Mr. Glenister handed her down the polished oak stair and stood at the iron railings until she had turned the south passage to New Square. Cecilia walked back to Mrs. Bromhead's at a gentle pace, the 4 warm things set very gentle in the reticule at her hand. The London chimney-tops kept the soft, pale yellow noon light. She came in at the Lincoln green door at 6 minutes past 12 and went up to the parlour where her aunt sat at the south fender in her soft amber silk. "My dear Cecilia," said Mrs. Walpole, rising warm from the chair, "you are at the door, very gentle. Is it well, my love?" "It is well, ma'am," said Cecilia gentle, and she gave her aunt the brass ring of 4 keys to hold a warm moment in the kind Lincolnshire hand. "Bramwell House is mine." Mrs. Walpole kept the keys a long warm moment and gave them gentle back. The 2 sat at the fire and took the midday cold beef and bread that Mrs. Bromhead had set ready. After the quiet dinner, they walked the south side of Carey Street as far as the Lincoln's Inn bookseller at the south end, where Cecilia bought a clean travelling prayer book bound in plum calf and a careful new memorandum book for the South Library. They came back by the kind afternoon at a little before 4, and Cecilia sat at the parlour writing table through the soft pale yellow London twilight, writing the warm gentle note to the Reverend Fanshawe that Mr. Glenister had charged her with. The Thursday and Friday following kept the lodging in gentle order. The 2 trunks were strapped at the south hall on the Friday evening, the dressing-case set at the top, the soft grey silk reticule with the will copy, and the bank draft and the brass ring folded into the inner pocket of the dressing-case in a clean white napkin. The Saturday morning of the 11th of December came on cold and clear before the dawn at the Bull and Mouth in Aldersgate. Mrs. Walpole and Cecilia were at the coachyard at the 6:15, the 2 trunks corded at the long coach roof under the warm tarpaulin, the dressing-case at Cecilia's gentle hand on the inside seat. The long coach drew out at the 6:30, exactly into the cool, pale yellow dawn light. The 4 bay horses took the cobbles at the gentle pace of a long coach run. The road went out of London by the North Stones. They breakfasted at the Angel at Peterborough in a warm parlour at the south side of the inn yard at a little past 11, with hot tea and mutton pasties and buttered crumpets, the grooms watering the bays at the south trough. They came on through the long pale yellow afternoon and were set down at the south door of the George at Stamford at the 5:15 of the evening, where the warm landlord kept 2 clean chambers ready against their coming. The Sunday morning of the 12th of December came on cold and bright over the Stamford slates. They heard the early parish office, and at the 9:30 took a hired post-chaise from the George for the last stage of their journey. The chaise took the careful warm Fenland road by Bourne, where Mrs. Walpole pointed out the kind grey roof of her own parsonage to Cecilia at the south window, by Spalding at the 12:30, where they paused for a warm cup of broth, and on by the gentle flat winter Fenland road to Westwold in the fen. It was at 3 of the clock that the chaise drew off the south road into the brick-paved south drive of Bramwell House. Cecilia put down the chaise window and looked at her godfather's house for the first time in her 26 years. Bramwell House lay at the south end of the drive in a kind warm winter stillness. It was a brick and pantile Fenland house of the year 1747, built by Dr. Bramwell's grandfather in the careful warm brick of the Lincolnshire fen makers, 2 stories to the south face, with an attic dormer row above the slated pantile, the south face of 7 mullioned windows giving on to the gentle drive, the warm grey rose brick, mellowed by the soft Fenland weather. To the south, the Welland fen ran in a long warm flat to the horizon, the reeds of the fen edge tawny and pale gold in the gentle pale yellow Lincolnshire winter afternoon light, the warm sun coming in over the reeds in a soft, careful, long slant. Cecilia drew one mild, gentle breath at the chaise window. The kind, warm Fenland stillness lay upon the brick face of the house. "It is a gentle house, ma'am," she said, gentle to her aunt. "It is, my dear," said Mrs. Walpole with the warm-born tenderness she'd carried at her side these 4 days, "and your godfather has been very kind to you." At the south door, on the warm brick step, the 4 of the Bramwell household stood ready in their kind, warm winter best. Mr. Yelverton, the butler, kept the upright tall figure at the right of the step. He was a kind, warm-faced man of 66, an inch under 6 foot, thin upright at the figure, his white hair brushed back, his warm grey eyes very gentle at his clean-shaven face, his plain black butler's tailcoat with the worn brass Bramwell buttons very clean at the step. He had been at the house 31 years, first under Dr. Bramwell's elder brother, and then under Dr. Bramwell's long absence-keeping. At his right hand, Mrs. Inchbald, the housekeeper, kept the gentle, warm Lincolnshire upright, a slender woman of 59, soft iron-grey hair beneath a clean white linen cap, warm hazel eyes very direct, a soft plum bombazine half morning gown with a white lawn fichu at the throat. Beyond her, Mrs. Jermyn the cook stood in her warm Fenland kindness, 53, her warm brown-grey hair beneath a large linen cap, kind hazel eyes ruddy at the cheek, her peach and cream print cotton gown clean under a white apron. At the left of the step, Mr. Glendower, the steward, kept the sturdy Fenland upright, a man of 61, soft mid-brown hair, warm blue-grey eyes, weathered fen-tanned skin, an olive-drab Fenland coat over a clean linen stock. Mr. Yelverton came down to the warm step at Cecilia's setting foot upon it. "Miss Radcliffe, ma'am," he said in his kind, warm Lincolnshire voice. "We are very glad to see you safe at Bramwell. The Reverend Dr. Bramwell's house is yours at the south door." "Mr. Yelverton," said Cecilia gentle, with a warm look at the 4 faces, "I am very glad to be at Bramwell. I am sensible of your kindness, and of Mrs. Inchbald's, and of Mrs. Jermyn's, and of Mr. Glendower's, in the careful keeping of the house against my coming down. She turned then to Mrs. Inchbald, who kept her warm hazel eyes very direct at the step. "Mrs. Inchbald," said Cecilia, gentle and firm, "I am sensible of your 26 years' service at this house. Pray keep the household exactly as Dr. Bramwell would have kept it had he been here." Mrs. Inchbald inclined her cap gentle, the warm Lincolnshire gravity at her hazel eyes. "I shall, ma'am, with all my warm Fenland heart," she said in her kind, direct voice. "Dr. Bramwell's house shall keep his gentle hand at every door." Mr. Yelverton handed Cecilia and Mrs. Walpole in at the great south door. The south hall was a warm, broad chamber of brown wainscot, with a kind, soft winter sun at the south fanlight, the warm grey rose brick of the inner arch giving on to a wide oak stair. Mrs. Inchbald led them gentle up the stair to the upper floor chambers, and Cecilia, with the warm, careful gentleness of a daughter coming in at her godfather's house for the first time, asked the lesser north wing chamber for her own keeping, that her aunt might have the warm south wing dressing room with the southern fenland view. "It is well thought, my dear," said Mrs. Walpole, gentle at the head of the stair. "The south wing is very kind on an old-born aunt." Mrs. Inchbald set the two chambers in warm fenland order before tea, the trunks brought up to the rooms by Mr. Yelverton and the south footman, the dressing-case set on the mahogany dressing-table at Cecilia's north wing chamber. The cool, pale yellow afternoon lay gentle upon the fenland reeds at the southern view from Mrs. Walpole's dressing-room window. At 6 of the clock that evening, Mrs. Inchbald brought up the tea service to the south library, where Cecilia and her aunt sat at the warm coal fire in the soft fenland twilight. The south library was a kind broad chamber of brown wainscot at the west wing, with two mullioned south windows giving on the warm Welland fen, a long fire of Fenland coal at the hearth, and the gentle 298 volumes of Dr. Bramwell's library set warm upon the dark oak shelves at the west wall. Mrs. Inchbald came in at the door with a careful Greek-bound box of brown morocco, kept gentle under her white apron, the Greek gilt lettering at the lid, worn soft by the warm Cambridge hand. "Ma'am," she said, gentle to Cecilia at the fender, "the Reverend Dr. Bramwell sent down to the South Library, by Mr. Glenister in the November post, this testamentary box. He desired that it should be set ready against your coming at the writing-table, ma'am, for your own warm, careful opening." She set the Greek-bound box gentle at the writing-table by the south window. "I thank you, Mrs. Inchbald," said Cecilia, gentle. "I shall open the box at my own warm leisure." She did not open it that evening. She set it gentle aside at the writing-table, for the slow, careful reading at her own time. The mantel above the South Library hearth carried a worn, calf-bound volume, Dr. Bramwell's King's College copy of Cowper's Olney Hymns, the gold lettering worn soft at the spine by the warm Cambridge hand. Cecilia, sitting at the fender with her warm tea, looked at the book upon the mantel a long, gentle moment. She knew the volume at once. Her godfather had read out of it to her late father in the Cambridge summer vacations at Trinity Hall in 1788 and 1789, of which her father had spoken at his South study in her girlhood. She did not pick the volume up. The kind worn calf at the mantel kept her gentle attention a careful moment, and she set her teacup gentle at the fender saucer. The Monday morning of the 13th of December came on mild and clear over the warm fenland reeds. At 10 of the clock, Mr. Glendower came up to the south door in his olive-drab fenland coat to take Cecilia at the estate walk. Mrs. Walpole sat at the south library fender with a Bourne novel. Cecilia put on her warm grey morning cloak, her half-morning gown, her half-boots, and her black silk bonnet for the gentle walk. "Ma'am," said Mr. Glendower at the brick step, in his kind, warm Fenland voice. The home pasture of the house is the careful 198 acres of fen pasture and reed bed, from the brick-paved drive at the east hedge to the Welland bank at the southern fen edge. He led her gentle down the drive by the warm grey rose brick gate and out at the home pasture by the south stile. The pasture lay in a long warm flat of soft pale green winter turf, the reed bed of the Welland fen running tawny and pale gold at the southern edge, the warm gentle wind stirring the reeds in the kind even rhythm of the fen water. A herd of 14 red Lincolnshire kine kept gentle at the southern end, the soft warm breath of the cattle kind in the cool air. Mr. Glendower set out the lie of the warm pasture to Cecilia in his careful kind Lincolnshire diction. The drainage of the south reed bed, kept gentle by the Welland bank these many years, the eastern hawthorn hedge at the parsonage glebe, the lesser kitchen garden behind the brick gate. He named each red cow by her warm Fenland name in the gentle fashion of an old fen steward. Cecilia walked the pasture with him in warm, careful attention until the 11:30, and came back to the south door at 12 of the clock for the gentle cold midday. The Sunday following, the 19th of December, Cecilia and her aunt walked the warm Fenland lane to St. Botolph's at Westwold in the Fen for the morning service at the 10:30. The church was a kind, warm Fenland church of the elder Lincolnshire pattern, with a soft grey rose brick tower and a south porch under a Fenland yew. The Reverend Octavius Fanshawe kept the porch in his black cassock, with the white linen surplice over his warm arm against the office. Mr. Fanshawe was a kind, warm Fenland clergyman of 55, with soft, sandy grey hair, finely thinning at the temple, warm blue-grey eyes very gentle behind his gold-rimmed spectacles, weathered Lincolnshire skin at the careful, warm scholar's face, and the black cassock kept very clean by Mrs. Fanshawe at the parsonage. He had been presented to the living by Dr. Bramwell in the autumn of 1814, and had borne a warm Cambridge correspondence with his patron these 5 winters past. "Miss Radcliffe, ma'am," he said gentle at the porch, "I am very glad to see you safe at Westwold. Your godfather spoke of you to me at the Cambridge post these many years. We are very glad of you at St. Botolph's." "Sir," said Cecilia gentle, "I am sensible of your kind. Welcome." He handed her and Mrs. Walpole in at the porch to the Bramwell pew, which was the careful, warm box pew at the south aisle, with the kind Fenland device of a heron over 3 reeds at the inner door, kept gentle by the parish carpenter these many years. Cecilia took her place at the south end of the pew, her aunt at her right, and read the office in her gentle, firm, Lincolnshire voice. The 2 weeks between the 19th and the 26th fell into the gentle, warm Fenland rhythm of an English country house in the soft winter season, with Mrs. Inchbald's careful housekeeping, Mrs. Jermyn's kind cooking, Mr. Yelverton lighting the south library fire each evening at 5, Mr. Glendower's gentle walk twice in the week, the daily reading of Cowper's hymns at the fender with Mrs. Walpole, the Christmas office at St. Botolph's, and the soft Lincolnshire snow that lay gentle upon the Fenland reeds. The Sunday of the 26th of December, St. Stephen's Day, came on cool and clear over the Westwold parsonage. Cecilia and Mrs. Walpole walked the gentle, warm Fenland lane to St. Botolph's at the 10:30 for the morning office. The Reverend Fanshawe read the service in his kind, warm Lincolnshire diction. The village congregation made the responses in the gentle Fenland fashion, and the warm, pale yellow Lincolnshire winter sun came in at the south clerestory upon the kind Bramwell pew. After the service, the Reverend Fanshawe stood at the porch with the warm, careful kindness of the parish vicar, and Cecilia gave him the gentle, warm thanks of a goddaughter who had come at last to her godfather's church. Mrs. Walpole took the kind hand of Mrs. Fanshawe at the porch and said the warm born word. Cecilia walked the warm Fenland lane back from St. Botolph's to Bramwell by the South Road. Mrs. Inchbald, in her soft plum bombazine half-mourning under a warm grey woolen pelisse and a clean white linen cap, walked the gentle 3 paces behind her at the careful kind Lincolnshire respect of a Bramwell housekeeper of 26 years. Mrs. Walpole had taken the carrier's gig, with the warm Mrs. Fanshawe a little ahead. At the south door of Bramwell House, Cecilia stood a careful, warm moment upon the brick step. She looked out at the south face of 7 mullioned windows, and then she turned south across the warm flat of the Welland Fen, where the tawny pale gold reeds lay gentle in the warm, pale yellow Lincolnshire winter afternoon light. The kind, gentle Fenland sun lay upon her cloak. Mrs. Inchbald kept the warm 3 paces behind, the kind hazel eyes very gentle at the step. Cecilia drew one mild, gentle breath at the warm door of Bramwell House. She was settled at Bramwell. The Wednesday morning of the 5th of January 1820 came in over the Lincolnshire fen in a pale, soft yellow light, the Welland Fen lying flat and grey-green to the south of Bramwell House, the leafless reed beds bending mild in a low east wind. The frost had gone in the night. A faint warm haze hung at the south sweep, where the carriage drive ran down to the lane. Cecilia was at the south library writing table by 8:15, in the plum and cream half-mourning gown with the white linen collar, her warm chestnut hair pinned smooth at the nape, her hazel eyes resting gentle at the south casement, where the long flat country lay open to the morning. The coal fire kept warm at the south library hearth. Dr. Bramwell's worn Cowper's Olney hymns lay where she had first set it back at the mantel on the December evening of her arrival. The mahogany mantel clock kept the warm hour. Mrs. Walpole, who had come over from Bourne for the New Year and meant to keep her niece company for the Lincolnshire fortnight, was at the second writing chair at the south window in her soft amber silk half-mourning, her warm hazel eyes gentle at the Morning Post bag that Mr. Yelverton had laid clean at the green baize. The Morning Post bag had been brought up the south sweep at 9:20 by the Westwold in the Fen postboy, and laid by Mr. Yelverton at the green baize of the south writing table. There were 3 papers in the bag: a letter from Mrs. Hatherton at Lincoln in her warm, careful hand, the Stamford Mercury for the Tuesday, and a further letter at the foot of the heap, sealed in a brown wax that Cecilia did not at first know. She took it up and turned it gentle at the light. The seal bore a small upright cipher of 2 letters, T.H., and beneath the cipher the address, Hatfield, Solicitor, Steep Hill, Lincoln. The paper was directed in a clean Lincoln clerk's italic to Miss Cecilia Radcliffe, at Bramwell House, Westwold in the Fen, near Spalding. She broke the seal and unfolded the paper at the writing table. The Hatfield letter ran: Number 14, Steep Hill, Lincoln. The 4th day of January, 1820. To Miss Cecilia Radcliffe, of Bramwell House, at Westwold in the Fen. Madame, I am instructed by my client, Mr. Tobias Cresswell of Lincoln, cotton merchant of the Steep Hill Cotton Broking House, to lay before you the following matter which touches the Bramwell House title. In the month of May of the year 1812, my client advanced to the late Mr. Ephraim Bramwell of Bramwell House the sum of £1,200 upon a mortgage loan against the Bramwell House title deeds at the customary rate of 5%. The loan was never formally redeemed at my client's office. My client therefore conceives himself to hold a quarter interest in the present estate of Bramwell House at Westwold in the Fen as collateral against the unpaid principal and the 7½ years' interest now accrued. My client is, however, prepared upon the present occasion to settle the entire claim against payment of the sum of £900 in cash within 14 days of the receipt of this letter, in full release of the said quarter interest. I have the honour to be, Madame, your obedient servant, John Hatfield, Solicitor. Cecilia read the Hatfield letter through at the warm south casement. The pale yellow Lincolnshire morning lay open at the leafless reed beds beyond the south lawn. She read the letter a second time at a slower pace, her hazel eyes gentle and careful at every line. Then she folded the paper clean at the green baize. Mrs. Walpole looked up gentle from her hemming. "My dear, you have read a paper with a careful gravity. Is there ill news at the post?" "It is not ill news, ma'am," said Cecilia gentle. "It is a Lincoln solicitor's letter that wishes me to be uneasy. Mr. Glenister will know what to make of it. I shall write to him at Lincoln's Inn before the noon post goes out. You will not be uneasy, my dear?" "No, ma'am. The matter is one for Mr. Glenister at his Fenland leisure, and not for me at the South Library writing table. Pray do not mind the letter, my dear aunt. It is a Lincoln matter, and a Lincoln matter is most often a paper that wishes to be larger than it is." Mrs. Walpole set her hemming at her knee, and looked at her niece with a warm, gentle approbation. "You are your mother's daughter, my love." Cecilia drew a clean half-sheet of writing paper to her hand and set out, in her careful schoolmistress's italic, a short letter to Mr. Geoffrey Glenister at No. 8 Old Square, Lincoln's Inn. She enclosed the Hatfield letter folded clean inside the cover. She set out the date of receipt, the broad shape of the Cresswell claim, and her wish for Mr. Glenister's gentle counsel at his earliest convenience. She did not ask him to come down. She left the matter to his judgment, and closed in the warm Lincoln's Inn fashion. "Your faithful and obliged servant, Cecilia Radcliffe." The letter was sealed in red wax, with her mother's Walpole signet, and laid at the south post tray. Mr. Yelverton took it to the south door at 10, where the postboy received the south-going bag for the Spalding mail. The Wednesday went on at Bramwell House, in the warm routine that the household had kept since Cecilia's coming. The Thursday brought a soft, pale frost back over the fen, and a clear, pale yellow afternoon. The Hatfield letter was not opened a third time. The Friday morning of the 7th of January came in clear and cool. The Stamford post-chaise was looked for at 3. Mr. Glenister had sent down a brief note by the Thursday late mail to say he would come over from Lincoln's Inn by the morning Stamford mail and would be at the South Sweep at 3 or a little after. Mr. Geoffrey Glenister came up the South Sweep at 4 minutes past 3 in a hired Stamford post-chaise. Mr. Yelverton was at the south door to receive him. He carried a long brown leather dispatch case under his left arm. The morning crape band for Dr. Bramwell was still upon his upper left sleeve. He was shown to the South Library, where Cecilia rose at the writing table to receive him. "Mr. Glenister, you are very kind to come down at so brief a notice." "My dear Miss Radcliffe, I should have come down sooner. A Lincoln solicitor's letter on a Wednesday morning is a matter for the South Library writing table, not for the Lincoln's Inn post bag. Pray show me the Hatfield paper, and we shall come at it at our gentle leisure." Cecilia gave him the Hatfield letter folded clean. Mr. Glenister set his gold-rimmed reading spectacles upon the bridge of his long, warm scholar's nose, read the paper through at the south casement, read it a second time at a slower pace, and laid it clean at the green baize. "Miss Radcliffe, the Hatfield letter is of the older predatory fashion. It rests upon 2 assertions, that Mr. Ephraim Bramwell, your godfather's elder brother, took up a loan of £1,200 from Mr. Cresswell in May 1812 against the Bramwell House title deeds, and that the loan was never formally redeemed. The first, I have small doubt, is true. The second I shall ask leave to test against the Bramwell House papers before we send our answer to Steep Hill. Mr. Ephraim. Bramwell kept his accounts in a clean ledger fashion, and the 1813 book is at the South Library. Pray let me send Mr. Yelverton to fetch it." Mr. Yelverton was rung for and dispatched to the second South Library shelf. He returned within 4 minutes with the 1813 book under his arm. Mr. Glenister opened it at the south writing table, and turned the leaves at his scholar's pace. At page 47, he stopped. The page bore the date, Friday the 14th of May, 1813, at the head, in Mr. Ephraim Bramwell's careful Lincolnshire hand. The entry at the third line ran: "This day paid in full to Mr. Tobias Cresswell of Lincoln, cotton merchant, the sum of £1,200, principal and 7½ months' interest at 5%, viz. £37, 10s, being the full redemption of the May 1812 mortgage loan against the Bramwell House title deeds. Total paid, £1,237, 10s. Receipt taken at the foot of this page." Beneath the entry, in a different and rather florid Lincoln hand, ran the signed receipt. "Received this day from Mr. Ephraim Bramwell of Bramwell House, the sum of £1,237, 10s, in full redemption of the May 1812 mortgage loan, and in full discharge of all claims arising therefrom. Tobias Cresswell, of Lincoln, Friday, 14th of May, 1813. Mr. Glenister read the entry aloud at the south casement and the signed receipt at the foot. He looked over the gold rims at Cecilia. "My dear Miss Radcliffe, the May 1812 loan was redeemed on the 14th of May, 1813, with interest paid in full, and Mr. Cresswell's own signed receipt at the foot of the page. The Hatfield claim is at law indefensible. Mr. Cresswell has either forgotten that he signed, or has chosen to chance that the Bramwell House account books are no longer in being. Either way, the matter will not stand at Chancery." Cecilia drew one gentle, even breath at the south window. She looked at the entry on page 47 and closed the book gentle at her hand. "Mr. Glenister," she said, in a mild, firm, gentle gravity that her mother might have known at 26, "the claim appears to me to be at law indefensible. Pray answer Mr. Hatfield in measured Lincoln's Inn fashion." "At my warm pleasure, my dear. I shall draft the answer on the Monday morning, and enclose a certified copy of the May 1813 page, taken at my own hand, with Mr. Yelverton and Mrs. Inchbald as the witnesses. The matter will end at Mr. Hatfield's office, and Mr. Cresswell will not be heard from again." Mr. Glenister was given the kind south chamber upstairs for the Friday and Saturday and Sunday nights by Cecilia's warm, gentle invitation, and Mrs. Inchbald's careful pleasure, at a guest of the late Dr. Bramwell's family. He took his supper at the south parlour at 6:30, with Cecilia and Mrs. Walpole, the warm Lincolnshire fen game pie of Mrs. German's making, the warm bread and butter, the kind table talk of an old family solicitor of 60 among warm Lincolnshire ladies of his client's kind. He spoke gentle of Dr. Bramwell at the chestnut window above the cam in the warm August afternoon of the will drawing, and of the warm, careful Cambridge classics his client had kept at the long oak table at the Fellows' Chamber. The Saturday and Sunday was spent in warm preparation of the certified copy at the South Library. On the Monday morning of the 10th of January, Mr. Glenister drafted the formal answer. It acknowledged Mr. Hatfield's letter of the 4th instant. It set out that the May 1812 loan had been redeemed in full on Friday the 14th of May, 1813, principal and interest, with Mr. Cresswell's signed receipt at the foot of page 47. It enclosed the certified copy attested by Mr. Yelverton and Mrs. Inchbald, and it requested the immediate withdrawal of the claim. It was signed, Geoffrey Glenister, solicitor to Miss Cecilia Radcliffe of Bramwell House at Westwold in the Fen. The letter was sealed and posted by the noon Stamford mail. The Tuesday morning of the 11th of January came in with a soft, pale rain over the fen, and the postboy brought the South Post bag at 20 minutes to 9 in a wet brown oilskin cape. There was a single letter for Bramwell House. It bore the Hatfield seal at Steep Hill, Lincoln. Mr. Glenister broke the seal himself at the South Library writing table. The Hatfield reply was short. It read, "Sir, your favour of the 10th instant, with the certified copy of the May 1813 page, is at hand. Notwithstanding the May 1813 settlement, my client, Mr. Cresswell, is instructed to press the claim upon the further grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation by the late Mr. Ephraim Bramwell at the May 1812 advance, which my client will set out in his bill in Chancery in due course. John Hatfield." Mr. Glenister read the letter through, took off his spectacles and laid the paper clean at the green baize. "Miss Radcliffe, this is bad faith litigation. Mr. Cresswell, shown his own signed receipt, is now obliged to manufacture a fresh ground, namely that Mr. Ephraim Bramwell misled him at the May 1812 advance. The ground is not capable of pleading, for a redeemed loan with signed receipt cannot be reopened at Chancery on a vague allegation of misrepresentation 7.5 years after the redemption. I shall write to Mr. Cresswell himself, declining further correspondence with Mr. Hatfield, and inviting him to withdraw his claim before further costs are incurred." "As you think fit, sir," said Cecilia Gentle. Mr. Glenister drafted the letter at noon, a short measured Lincoln's Inn letter, declining further correspondence with Mr. Hatfield, setting out the May 1813 redemption with Mr. Cresswell's own signed receipt, observing that any bill in Chancery upon the proposed fresh ground would not stand, and inviting Mr. Cresswell to withdraw at his gentle leisure. It was addressed to Mr. Tobias Cresswell at the Steep Hill Cotton Broking House at Lincoln, and posted by the Tuesday noon mail. There came no answer at the Wednesday post, nor at the Thursday, nor at the Friday, Saturday, Monday, or Tuesday. The household kept its warm routine. Mr. Glenister, who had meant to take the Monday mail back to Lincoln's Inn, was urged by Cecilia to stay until the close of the second week. On the Wednesday morning of the 19th of January, 1820, the pale yellow Lincolnshire sun came in over the south sweep at 9:30. Cecilia was at the South Library writing table, Mr. Glenister at the second writing chair, Mrs. Walpole at her hemming at the south window. At 20 minutes past 11, Mr. Yelverton came in at the South Library door. "Madame, a gentleman in a hired Lincoln post chaise is at the south sweep, who gives his name as Mr. Tobias Cresswell of Lincoln, cotton merchant, and who wishes to wait upon you. He has no card of introduction, madam." Cecilia drew one gentle, even breath. "Mr. Glenister?" "Show the gentleman to the south parlour, Mr. Yelverton. Miss Radcliffe will be at the parlour with myself and Mrs. Walpole in 5 minutes. Pray fetch the May 1813 account book and the certified copy of page 47, and lay them at the south parlour writing table at my right hand. Mrs. Inchbald will be sent for, that she may sit at the corner with her sewing." "At your warm pleasure, sir," said Mr. Yelverton, and went out. The south parlour at Bramwell House was a kind warm Lincolnshire parlour at the south-west corner, with 3 south casements upon the leafless reed beds, a soft pale cream wainscot, 2 upright country chairs by the south fire, a writing table in the west window, and a sewing chair at the corner. Cecilia sat at the nearer chair by the south fire, in the plum and cream half-mourning gown, her hazel eyes gentle and very direct. Mrs. Walpole sat at the second sewing chair with her hemming. Mrs. Inchbald sat at the corner sewing chair with the clean linen at her hand. Mr. Glenister sat at the writing table at the west window, the 1813 account book open at page 47 at his left hand and the certified copy at his right. Mr. Yelverton kept the parlour doorway. Mr. Tobias Cresswell was shown in at 25 minutes past 11. He was a florid, sharp-featured man of 54, medium 5'10", upright with a Lincoln cotton merchant's stoop at the shoulder, his sandy, thinning hair carefully oiled forward at the brow, his sallow complexion broken by the small red veins of long Lincoln taproom hours, a weak, narrow chin, small, pale grey eyes, that moved at the south parlour with a careful Lincoln businessman's appraisal. He wore an expensive Manchester wool tailcoat of a dark bottle green with worn gilt buttons, a primrose yellow silk waistcoat slightly stained at the lapel, fawn pantaloons of a careful Lincoln tailor's cut, and town boots of black calf with a wet print at the toes from the south sweep. He carried a small Lincoln Morocco note case of dark brown calf under his left arm. He set the note case at the south parlour writing table with a businessman's directness and made a short, curt bow at the room. "Miss Radcliffe," he said in a sharp Lincoln businessman's voice with the close pinched vowels of the steep hill cotton-broking houses, "I am obliged to wait upon you in person, since the matter of the Bramwell House title appears to have been mistaken at the Lincoln's Inn End. I am Mr. Tobias Cresswell of Lincoln Cotton Merchant. I have come down from Steep Hill on the noon road. I shall not detain you above a quarter of an hour." Cecilia inclined her head gentle, but did not rise from the upright country chair. "Mr. Cresswell, pray be seated. Mr. Glenister will speak to the matter you raise." Mr. Cresswell took the upright chair at the west of the writing table, opened the note case, and drew out a folded paper that Cecilia knew at sight to be a copy of the Hatfield letter of the 4th of January. "Miss Radcliffe, I shall be brief. My loan of £1,200 to the late Mr. Ephraim Bramwell in May 1812 was advanced upon the Bramwell House title deeds at my Lincoln office. The redemption receipt at the May 1813 account book is, I will not deny, in my own hand, but the May 1812 advance was procured from me by Mr. Ephraim Bramwell's representation as to the unencumbered fen pasture, which was at the plainest facts misleading. My claim upon the present occasion is upon that misrepresentation. A redeemed loan procured by fraud at the advance is at law reopenable at Chancery. I am, however, prepared at the present meeting to compromise the entire claim at the sum of £600. I have brought down the draft bill in Chancery in this note case for your gentle inspection." Mr. Glenister did not at once answer. He took up the 1813 account book, opened it at page 47, and turned the page round at the writing table so that it lay open before Mr. Cresswell. "Mr. Cresswell, I shall read aloud the entry of Friday the 14th of May, 1813, in Mr. Ephraim Bramwell's hand, and the signed receipt at the foot in your own. Pray set your eye at the signature as I read." Mr. Glenister read the entry through. The date, the sum, principal and 7 1/2 months' interest at 5%, the total of £1,237, 10 shillings, and then the receipt at the foot. Received this day from Mr. Ephraim Bramwell of Bramwell House, the sum of £1,237, 10 shillings, in full redemption of the May 1812 mortgage loan, and in full discharge of all claims arising therefrom. Tobias Cresswell of Lincoln. Friday, 14th of May, 1813. Mr. Cresswell's florid complexion altered a careful shade. The red veins about the nose darkened. His pale grey eyes did not at first lift from the receipt. He laid one short, blunt finger upon the signature and drew it back again. He did not, at that quarter minute, speak. Cecilia rose at the upright country chair by the south fire. She stood a gentle, warm moment at the south parlour rug, the pale yellow Lincolnshire morning at the south casements behind her, her warm chestnut hair smooth at the nape, her hazel eyes very direct at Mr. Cresswell. The mantel clock kept the warm hour. Mrs. Inchbald did not look up from her sewing. Mrs. Walpole did not stir at her hemming. Mr. Yelverton kept the parlour doorway. "Mr. Cresswell," said Cecilia, in the warm, gentle Lincolnshire voice that had carried her schoolmistress's class for 2 years at Mrs. Hatherton's reading school at Lincoln, but with a careful, firm, cold finish that Mr. Cresswell had not been ready for. "You have my answer in one sentence. my late godfather's elder brother, Mr. Ephraim Bramwell, in his Bramwell House account book of the 14th of May, 1813, which Mr. Glenister now lays before you, paid your full settlement of £1,200 for the May 1812 loan, with 7 months' interest at the customary rate of 5% and your own signed receipt at the foot. Your present claim is at law indefensible and at conscience worse. Mr. Yelverton, this gentleman is leaving us. I wish you a gentle journey back to Lincoln." Mr. Cresswell opened his mouth and closed it again. He looked one careful moment at Cecilia, at the gentle, direct hazel eyes that did not waver, and at the warm, gentle mouth that had spoken the last sentence without raising its pitch. He looked at Mr. Glenister. He gathered the note-case with a short, curt motion, and rose. "Madam," he said in the sharp Lincoln voice, lower than at his coming in, "I shall withdraw. Mr. Yelverton, Mr. Cresswell's chaise." Mr. Yelverton bowed gentle at the doorway. "At your warm pleasure, madam." He opened the parlour door and stood aside. Mr. Cresswell passed at the doorway with the note-case under his left arm. He did not look back. Mr. Yelverton walked at his left shoulder down the south passage to the south door, where the hired Lincoln post chaise was waiting at the south sweep. At 20 minutes past noon, the chaise rolled north along the south sweep, took the lane to Spalding, and was lost at the bend of the reed beds. The household did not see Mr. Cresswell again. Mr. Yelverton came back at the parlour at 23 minutes past noon. "Mr. Cresswell is at the road for Lincoln, madam." "Thank you, Mr. Yelverton. Pray let Mrs. German know that we shall take our luncheon at 1. "At your warm pleasure, madam." Mr. Glenister closed the 1813 account book and looked over the gold rims at Cecilia, his long, warm scholar's face wearing the gentle approbation of a family solicitor of 60 who had seen the matter through. "Miss Radcliffe, you have made the warm end of the Cresswell claim that the Lincoln's Inn paper alone could not have made. The signature at the foot and the warm, direct sentence at the parlour rug will be at his memory for some little while. It is over, sir. It is over at the south parlour, my dear. There remains the matter of Mr. Hatfield's office at Steep Hill, which I shall close by a short letter on the Thursday, and the further matter of Mr. Cresswell's own commercial standing at the Lincoln cotton-broking houses, upon which I shall ask my London correspondent to make a gentle inquiry by the next mail." Cecilia inclined her head gentle. On the Thursday morning of the 20th of January, the South Post bag brought a letter from Mr. Glenister's London correspondent. He opened the seal at the South Library writing table and read it through. "Miss Radcliffe, the gentle inquiry is at hand. Mr. Cresswell is overextended at the 3 Lincoln cotton-broking houses to the sum of £3,800. Mr. Hatfield cannot file the proposed bill in Chancery without a retainer of 50 guineas, and Mr. Cresswell has been refused that retainer at 2 of the 3 Lincoln sponsor houses. The third has not yet refused, but my correspondent does not anticipate a further answer. The Chancery proceeding cannot be brought." "Thank you, Mr. Glenister." "It is the warm close of the matter, my dear, save for Mr. Hatfield's formal letter of withdrawal, which I shall expect within the next fortnight." Mr. Glenister kept the kind south chamber a further week by Cecilia's warm invitation to see the Hatfield withdrawal to its formal close. On the Friday morning of the 28th of January, 1820, the South Post bag brought a single letter under the Hatfield seal. Mr. Glenister broke the seal and read the short, formal letter of withdrawal. It acknowledged Mr. Glenister's letter of the 11th instant, set out that Mr. Cresswell, upon further consideration, was advised to withdraw the claim upon the Bramwell House title, and confirmed that no bill in Chancery would be filed at the present or any future date. It was signed, John Hatfield, Solicitor. Mr. Glenister laid the paper clean at the green baize. "It is at an end, Miss Radcliffe. Thank you, Mr. Glenister. You have been very kind. My dear, it has been my warm pleasure." Mr. Glenister took his leave at the south door at noon, with his long brown dispatch case under his left arm. He was to catch the Stamford mail at 1. Cecilia gave him her hand a gentle, warm moment. "Mr. Glenister, I shall write to Old Square when I have any further word. At your warm pleasure, my dear. Bramwell House is in kind hands." Mrs. Walpole, who meant to be back at Bourne by the close of the month, took the same mail. She kissed Cecilia at the warm brow. "My love, you have done what your dear mother would have done at 26. Pray write at Bourne, by the next post bag." "I shall, ma'am, by the Saturday post." The chaise rolled south at 5 minutes past noon. The household stood a gentle, warm moment at the south sweep, Mr. Yelverton at the door, Mrs. Inchbald at the porch, Mr. Glendower at the gate. The chaise was lost at the bend of the reed beds. Cecilia turned and walked back the warm, gentle pace to the south door. On the Saturday morning of the 29th of January, 1820, Cecilia was at the South Library writing table at 3:30 of the warm, pale yellow Lincolnshire afternoon. The Hatfield withdrawal lay folded modest at her elbow upon the green baize. She did not at the present hour read it again. The warm, pale yellow afternoon lay open over the leafless reed beds at the Welland Fen's edge, the long flat country running gentle to the south, the soft east wind at the reed tops. The coal fire at the South Library hearth kept its warm hour. The household had gone to its warm routine. Mrs. Inchbald at the linen press, Mrs. German at the kitchen, Mr. Yelverton at the butler's pantry, Mr. Glendower at the South Fen gate. She set her hands gentle upon the green baize and looked at Dr. Bramwell's worn Cowper's Olney hymns, where it still stood upon the mantel, where she had first noticed it on the cool December evening of her arrival, when Mr. Yelverton had set the South Library fire fresh against the dusk. She thought, at the gentle pace of a young woman of 26 at the close of a long matter, of what her late father Augustine had carried at 21 at Trinity Hall under Dr. Bramwell's tutorship in classics in 1789. She had the small image of her father, at the Cambridge May vacation of that year, the warm, careful young curate-to-be at the long oak table at the Trinity Hall Fellows' Chamber, with his Greek folios at his elbow, and Dr. Bramwell across the table in the kind tutor's gown, reading a passage of Sophocles at the slow Cambridge fashion. She had heard her father speak of that vacation at the parsonage at St. Peter at the Fen on a warm summer evening of her 9th year. The warm dust of the Lincolnshire harvest at the casement, his careful voice at the parlour mantel. "My dear Cecilia, the kind tutor at Trinity Hall is the warm candle of a young man's mind, and Dr. Bramwell at Cambridge was the warm candle of mine." She thought of what Cambridge had meant to her godfather in his long Fellows' Room's retirement at the chestnut window above the river. The 47 years at King's, the warm, careful classics, the long oak table at the chestnut window, the Greek folios at his elbow, the slow turning of the warm Cambridge seasons at the riverside, the gentle pace of an older bachelor scholar at his rooms. She had not known him in his life. She had not crossed the threshold of his King's chamber, or heard his careful voice at a Trinity vacation, or sat at the long oak table at the chestnut window in her own person. She knew him now at the South Library hearth, at the worn Cowper, at the mantel, at the careful italic of the August 1819 testamentary letter, at the kind warm bequest of Bramwell House and its 198 acres of fen pasture. The warm candle of his classics class of 1788 had been her father, and the warm candle of his Cambridge bachelor's heart, in some kind silent fashion of an older Cambridge man, had been her father's daughter at the parsonage at St. Peter at the Fen. The pale yellow afternoon deepened a careful warm shade at the south casement. The reed beds bent gentle at the east wind. Cecilia did not at the present hour read the Hatfield withdrawal again, and did not, at the warm hearth, celebrate the close of the Cresswell matter. She sat in warm, gentle Lincolnshire quiet, with the worn cowper on the mantel above her, and let the long flat country at the south casement hold her at its pale yellow January light. The clock struck 4 at the south library mantel. The last days of January 1820 came on cool and pale yellow over Bramwell House, and Cecilia, at her gentle upright at the south library writing table, in the plum and cream half-morning gown, took up the warm, careful work of the parish at Westwold in the Fen, that her late godfather at King's had asked of her at his sealed letter. She did not go up to Lincoln, nor write to the Spalding bookseller for any new music. She set her gentle, firm hand to the matters at her own Fenland gate. Her week took its warm, careful Lincolnshire shape. Writing table mornings at the South Library, Fen Lane walks with Mr. Glendower on the Mondays and Thursdays, the parish school's reading class on Wednesdays at Reverend Fanshaw's settled arrangement, the customary Sunday morning at St. Botolph's, where the Bramwell pew at the south aisle had been kept her these 8 Sundays past. The writing table mornings were of her gentle Lincolnshire pace. She wrote at the Green Bays from 9 until noon, the household ledger at her left hand, Dr. Bramwell's worn King's College commonplace book of his last 7 Cambridge years at her right, the worn leather pocketbook of her own careful entries at the inkwell. Mrs. Jermyn came up at 10:30 with chocolate. Mr. Yelverton brought up the Morning Post at 11. The pale yellow Lincolnshire winter sun crept along the green bays from the south sash window at its own gentle pace. The Monday and Thursday Fen Lane walks with Mr. Glendower were of the Fenland register her late father had kept her at the parsonage at 12 years old. They went down at 11:30 through the south sweep, across the home pasture to the lower reed bed, and along the Welland Fen bank to the field that looked south to the village of Westwold in the Fen. Mr. Glendower spoke at his warm, equable Lincolnshire pace of the home fen, the early ewes of the Glendower flock at the lower paddock, the new willow cuttings set at the south bank, at his own gentle planting of the November past, the worn south boundary hedge that should be laid by Mr. Spalding, the village hedger at the Lady Day quarter day. Cecilia listened at her gentle Lincolnshire attention, and laid down at her own gentle pace the matters of the home pasture at her own hand. The Wednesday reading class at the parish school at Westwold in the Fen had been settled at Reverend Fanshaw's gentle asking at the first Saturday of February. 6 Fenland village girls, the eldest 12, the youngest 7, came up at 3 o'clock at the brick and pantile schoolroom beside the south porch of St. Botolph's. Bess Glendower, Tabitha Welland, Damaris Spalding, Letty Boston, Ruth Fanshawe, and Maggie Yelverton. Cecilia read with them through Miss Edgeworth's Frank at the cloth-bound village copy, and the 5th and 6th stanzas of Cowper's Yardley Oak at her own green leather pocket cowper that she had brought down from the South Library. She heard the 6 girls read aloud in their Fenland voices at the schoolroom hearth, and gave to Bess Glendower, the eldest, the gentle task of hearing the youngest, Maggie Yelverton, at her own pace. Through the 3 Thursday afternoons of Lent, she gave them, at Reverend Fanshaw's settled arrangement, a little French of bonjour and merci and je vous remercie, and a little Latin of amo, amus amat, at her gentle Lincolnshire pace, and at no theatrical hurry. The Sunday morning at St. Botolph's was of the register her late father had kept at the parsonage for 21 years. Mr. Yelverton brought the Bramwell shares up at the south sweep at 10:30. Mrs. Inchbald came up beside Cecilia at the chaise in her soft plum bombazine. The chaise went down the south sweep and across the Welland Fen Lane to the brick and pantile village at the slow tilt of 11. The Bramwell pew at the south aisle had been kept her these 8 Sundays past at Reverend Fanshaw's gentle hand. Cecilia inclined gentle at the south porch at the parish women in their Fenland bonnets, Mrs. Fanshawe the vicar's wife at the vicarage, old Mrs. Boston at the South Paddock cottage, Mrs. Spaulding of the home pasture, Mrs. Welland of the upper farm, and went gentle to the Bramwell pew at her gentle pace. Mrs. Walpole, who had been at Bramwell through the first Lent fortnight, returned at the Tuesday morning of the 1st of February to her Bourne house. Mrs. Hatherton, the late master's daughter of the Lincoln Reading School where Cecilia had kept her 3 years of warm, careful teaching, wrote at the gentle hand of an old Lincoln friend of 57 years that she should come down from Lincoln for the second Lent fortnight. Cecilia wrote at her own warm gratitude. Mrs. Hatherton came down by the Lincoln chaise at the cool, clear, pale yellow Saturday afternoon of the 19th of February, and was set at the south door of Bramwell House by Mr. Yelverton at 3:20. She was a kind woman of 57 years, at her widowhood of the Lincoln Cathedral Close, in soft mulberry silk, half mourning over a clean white lawn fichu, her soft iron-grey hair smooth at the nape under a clean white linen cap. Cecilia received her at the south porch in warm Lincolnshire gladness, and Mrs. Inchbald took her up at the south guest chamber at the careful arrangement of the household. The evening reading companion hour with Mrs. Hatherton at the South Library was of the gentle register Dr. Bramwell's own Cambridge fellowship had kept at the King's chestnut window these 41 years past. From 7 o'clock to 9 each evening, the two were at the sea-coal fire, Cecilia at the wing chair beside the south mantel, Mrs. Hatherton at the parlour chair across the hearth at her sewing of the household linen. They read together at gentle turns from Dr. Bramwell's own copy of Cowper's Olney Hymns from the South Library mantel, the warm Cambridge volume of 1779, with his careful pencil marginalia from his King's College classes of 1788 and 1789 to Augustine Radcliffe, the gentle hand of an old Cambridge bachelor at the margin of the 7th hymn, the kind italic note at the 18th. The warm, careful question to his Trinity Hall pupil at the foot of the 24th. Mrs. Hatherton's hazel eyes were very direct at the sea-coal light, and her gentle reading voice was of the careful pace of a Lincoln schoolmistress of 33 years. The Wednesday afternoon of the 22nd of March, 1820, came up over Bramwell at the pale yellow Lincolnshire spring sun, the early fen snowdrops gentle along the south sweep at their gentle pace, the first reed warbler at the lower fen at his early March song. Cecilia was at the South Library writing table at her gentle upright at 3:30 when Mrs. Inchbald came up gentle at the South Library door with a small Greek-bound box of dark leather at her careful hand. Miss Radcliffe. Dr. Bramwell had set this gentle at the South Library Aumbry at his last asking of the October of the year past, that I should bring it up at your settled hand at the Lincolnshire spring, and at no earlier hour. I have kept it gentle at the Aumbry these 4 months past, at his warm, careful asking. Mrs. Inchbald laid the Greek-bound box, gentle at the green baize, at Cecilia's right hand. Cecilia laid down her pen gentle at the inkwell, looked one warm, careful moment at the pale yellow Lincolnshire afternoon at the south sash window, and untied the worn black ribbon at the box at her own gentle pace. The box held 4 matters. The first was the 1793 Greek-bound parish register copy of Cecilia's baptism at St. Peter at the Fen on the 12th of May 1793. The warm parchment folded gentle at the green silk ribbon, the kind italic of the parsonage register clerk at the careful entries, and at the lower margin, Dr. Bramwell's own careful italic in his King's College ink, "My dear small Cecilia," in the warm parish water of her father's Lincolnshire. The second was a bound bundle of 36 unsent letters in Dr. Bramwell's careful italic, each at a single sheet of cream Cambridge foolscap, each folded gentle in the third, each sealed at the Red King's wax of his college seal, each directed to Miss Cecilia Radcliffe at the parsonage of St. Peter at the Fen, near Lincoln, in his gentle hand, dated at the gentle quarterly pace from her 7th birthday of the 12th of May, 1800 onward, to the Cambridge autumn of 1819. The third was a pencil sketch upon a single sheet of cream drawing paper. Elspeth Radcliffe, née Walpole, at the Cambridge May Ball of 1789, at the chestnut window of King's, the warm Lincolnshire candle of the Walpole family at her chestnut hair, pinned smooth at the nape, drawn at careful memory by Dr. Bramwell at the autumn of 1812, after Elspeth's death of the spring fever of that year. The fourth was a small black silk pouch, the Bramwell family pearls at a single row of moderate Lincolnshire worth, given to Dr. Bramwell's mother on her marriage at the parish of Long Sutton in the Fenland, summer of 1758, to be given to Cecilia upon Mrs. Inchbald's settled judgment. Cecilia laid the four matters gentle in turn at the green baize. She held the pencil sketch of her late mother at her cousin's May ball in the warm Cambridge spring of 1789. One careful moment at the central crease looked at the hazel eyes of the young Lincolnshire woman at the chestnut window in her 21st year. The soft chestnut hair pinned smooth at the nape, the warm hazel eyes very direct, the gentle mouth, and laid it gentle at her left hand. She thanked Mrs. Inchbald at her warm Lincolnshire gravity, and asked that the box be left at the South Library writing table at her own careful hand for the gentle fortnight of the Lincolnshire spring afternoons. She read the 36 unsent letters at her gentle Lincolnshire pace through the fortnight that followed, at the green baize at 3:30 each spring afternoon, one letter, or at most 2 at a sitting. The pale yellow afternoon sun, gentle at her warm chestnut hair, pinned smooth at the nape. The letters in their warm, careful regard held the matters of her own 26 years at the parsonage of St. Peter at the Fen, her late mother Elspeth's young womanhood at the Cambridge May Ball of 1789, the Reverend Augustine Radcliffe's gentle Lincolnshire character at his curacy of 21 years, Cecilia's own childhood music lessons at the parsonage pianoforte at her late mother's hand, all heard at gentle pace by Dr. Bramwell at the Cambridge post through the Fenland years. The careful afternoon of the second day of her reading, Thursday the 23rd of March, the pale yellow Lincolnshire spring sun, gentle at the south sash window at the slow tilt of 4 o'clock. She took up at the bundle the third of the 36 letters. The 7th birthday letter, dated 12th May 1800, written at the small fellow's writing table, at the chestnut window at King's in the warm pale yellow Cambridge May afternoon of her birthday week, opened with the salutation, "My dear small Cecilia, who shall be 7 years old, at St. Peter at the Fen, this Saturday morning at the parsonage south door." It read, "You shall not, I think, ever read this letter, for I have not yet the courage to send it. But I write it on the morning of your 7th birthday at Lincoln, in the warm May afternoon at the chestnut window at King's, to set down at the small fellow's writing table, for my own quiet, what your dear mother Elspeth would have set down had she lived to see it, that the small Radcliffe girl at the Fen parsonage shall keep the Bramwell candle as I have kept it, and as the Bramwell family had kept it through 5 Lincolnshire generations past, and shall be a small good woman in her hour at the parsonage gate. My dear small Cecilia, I shall not be at the parsonage south door this Saturday morning, with the small Lincolnshire reed cradle of Fenland honey I had thought of bringing you. The fault is the small one of an old Cambridge bachelor at his chestnut window. Your godfather, Hugh Bramwell. Cecilia set the letter down upon the green baize. She held it gentle at the central crease for one warm, careful moment, and then, for the small composed quiet of the South Library writing table, she did weep. One warm, careful tear at the right cheek, no more, at the godfather who had not, in her 26 years, come to the parsonage south door with a small Lincolnshire reed cradle of Fenland honey at her 7th birthday. Mrs. Inchbald, at the parlour side of the writing table, set down her sewing and did not speak. She sat in warm, kind Lincolnshire silence for the small, quiet 10 minutes that followed. The pale yellow Lincolnshire spring afternoon went on gentle at the south sash window over the lower reed bed. The first reed warbler of the fen march was at his early song at the Welland fen bank. Mrs. Inchbald did not rise at the parlour chair, and Cecilia did not at the present hour speak. The two were at the gentle, warm hush of two Lincolnshire women who had each in her own careful way held the Bramwell house at her own gentle hand. After the 10 minutes, Cecilia lifted her hazel eyes from the green baize, gave Mrs. Inchbald one gentle incline of her chestnut head, and folded the 7th birthday letter back gentle at its 3rd. She did not at the rest of the fortnight, nor at any hour of the further script that follows, shed a second tear. The warm regard of Dr. Bramwell at the 36 letters was at her gentle Lincolnshire hand from that March afternoon at her own pace. She copied 3 other of the 36 letters into her own cloth-bound commonplace book at her gentle italic. Dr. Bramwell's gentle reflections upon her late mother Elspeth at the Cambridge May Ball of 1789, upon the parsonage at St. Peter at the Fen, at her late father's curacy, upon the parsonage parlour pianoforte at her own childhood, at her late mother's hand. The further 32 she folded gentle back into the worn black ribbon at the bundle, and laid the Greek-bound box gentle at the South Library, ombre at Mrs. Inchbald's settled hand. Reverend Fanshawe came up at the rectory tea of Wednesday the 12th of April at 4:30, at his black cassock and his small gold-rimmed spectacles. He sat at the south parlour wing-chair across the sea-coal hearth, took the Bramwell china at Mrs. Jermyn's gentle hand, and observed at his gentle Lincolnshire pace that he had had at the October of the year passed one last careful conversation with Dr. Bramwell at the King's chestnut window, at the careful close of an October visit at which Dr. Bramwell had been at his settled hour upon the writing-chair at the chestnut window. Miss Radcliffe, he spoke to me at that October afternoon at the warm, careful asking pardon of an old Cambridge bachelor at the close of his Lincolnshire hour. He asked at his gentle hand that I should bring his small Lincolnshire candle. And at that gentle pace, he meant yourself, my dear. The Greek-bound testamentary box at the South Library ombre, with his warm, careful asking pardon for the 26 years he had not come over to the parsonage south door. Cecilia laid her careful hand gentle upon the green baize of the south parlour table beside the Bramwell china, and inclined her chestnut head at his warm Lincolnshire kindness. Reverend Fanshawe. The box was at Mrs. Inchbald's settled hand at the Wednesday of the 22nd of March, at the Lincolnshire Spring. The matter is at its careful place at the present hour. Miss Radcliffe, I am very glad of it, my dear. The connection squares warm at my own hand. The Lady Day quarter day of Saturday the 25th of March, 1820, was the first quarter day of Cecilia's own Lincolnshire ownership at Bramwell House. The home pasture tenants came up at 10:30 at the South Library writing table at Mr. Glendower's settled arrangement. Mr. Spalding, the home pasture tenant in his Fenland smock at his gentle manner. Mrs. Fanshawe, the vicar's wife at the vicarage in her clean fawn cotton gown. Old Mr. Boston at the South Paddock cottage in his worn moss-green wool coat. Mr. Glendower brought up the customary account at the Green Bays. The home pasture rent of the Spalding farm was the customary March quarter at the Green Bays. The cottage rents of Mrs. Fanshawe at the vicarage and old Mr. Boston at the South Paddock cottage were the customary quarter at the gentle Lincolnshire pace. Cecilia signed the Bramwell quarter-day account at the careful close of the morning in her gentle warm italic at the Green Bays, Cecilia Radcliffe, in the parish of Westwold in the Fen, this Saturday, the 25th of March, 1820, and laid down the pen gentle at the inkwell. The three tenants took their Lincolnshire leave at the south door at the slow tilt of noon, and Mr. Glendower took up the account at his steward's hand to be laid gentle at the home fen strong box at the careful close of the morning. The Wednesday afternoon of the 12th of April brought the Fenland schoolgirls of Cecilia's reading class up at the south porch at 3 o'clock in their clean Fenland print frocks. They had come up the Welland Fen Lane at Bess Glendower's gentle leading at her 12 years, and at Tabitha Welland's gentle hand at her 11 years. The 6 girls in Fenland order at the south porch, Bess Glendower, at her chestnut plait and her warm Fenland gravity, held at her hand a small cloth-bound wildflower album of pressed Lincolnshire early spring blossoms, fen snowdrops, marsh violets, early Lincolnshire celandine, the first reed primrose of the south bank at the Welland Fen, bound gentle at the cream linen by Bess's own gentle hand at the parsonage kitchen table of the previous Saturday afternoon. Miss Radcliffe, we had thought, the 6 of us, that the Lincolnshire spring at Bramwell and the gentle Wednesday afternoons at the schoolroom should have a Fenland remembrance at your own careful hand. We had pressed the wildflowers at February and March, and Tabitha and I had bound the album gentle on the Saturday last. Cecilia received the wildflower album at the south porch in gracious, gentle Lincolnshire gratitude. She inclined her chestnut head, gentle at each of the 6 village girls in turn, Bess, Tabitha, Damaris, Letty, Ruth, Maggie, and took them gentle up to the South Library at Mrs. Inchbald's careful direction. At the South Library mantel she gave each of the 6 girls a cloth-bound Aesop from the worn South Library shelf. The honey fawn covers at the gentle Lincolnshire pace, each at the front, fly-leaf inscribed gentle at her warm italic, to Bess Glendower, this 12th of April, 1820, from Miss Radcliffe, Bramwell House, with my warm Fenland thanks. C.R. The mid-April brought up at the gentle Lincolnshire pace, the Bramwell family pearls. Mrs. Inchbald came up at the Wednesday morning of the 19th of April at 10:30, with the black silk pouch at her careful hand at the South Library writing table. Miss Radcliffe, Dr. Bramwell had asked, at his warm October asking pardon at the King's chestnut window, that the Bramwell pearls be set at your careful throat at my own settled judgment at the Lincolnshire spring of your gentle settling at Bramwell. I had thought, at the gentle Easter at hand, that the careful hour was at its place. Cecilia laid down her pen gentle at the inkwell. Mrs. Inchbald opened the silk pouch at the Green Bays. The Bramwell family pearls, a single row of pearls of moderate Lincolnshire worth, given to Dr. Bramwell's mother on her marriage at the parish of Long Sutton in the Fenland, summer of 1758, set at the worn gold clasp at the lower end, lay gentle at the cream silk lining. Cecilia took the row gentle in her careful hand, and looked at it one gentle moment in warm Lincolnshire gravity. Mrs. Inchbald, I thank you gentle for the settled judgment at this Lincolnshire April. The pearls shall be at the warm Easter at St. Botolph's at your own settled hand. The pianoforte at the South Library by the south sash window was the Bramwell instrument of a careful Lincoln maker of 1791. A walnut square pianoforte of honey amber polish, the cream ivory of the keys at her careful hand. Cecilia played at the gentle evenings for Mrs. Hatherton at the sea-coal hearth, the airs of Mr. Handel and Dr. Boyce at her own gentle pace, the Fenland ballads of her late mother Elspeth at her own warm hand. Reverend Fanshawe called on the Friday afternoon of the 21st of April at 4:30 to ask, at his Lincolnshire gravity, if Cecilia would play at the Westwold Parish School annual prize-giving at the village hall on the Wednesday of the 18th of May. Miss Radcliffe, the parish school's prize-giving at the village hall at 3:30 on the 18th of May should be at its kind gratification by the Lincolnshire airs at your gentle hand at the village pianoforte. I had thought to ask gentle at this Easter week. Cecilia acquiesced at her kind, gentle Lincolnshire gravity. Reverend Fanshawe, I shall, at the Wednesday of the 18th of May, at 3:30 at the village hall. The late pale yellow Lincolnshire April brought up Cecilia's half-mourning gentle to its careful close, the plum and cream half-mourning gown that she had worn through the 4.5 months of Fenland winter, through the January at Mr. Cresswell's hour at the South Parlour rug, through the February of the reading class, and through the March of the 36 unsent letters, was laid gentle at the north wing wardrobe at the Tuesday morning of the 18th of April. In its place, she took down the fresh cream and reed green sprigged muslin of her late mother Elspeth, at the worn parsonage trunk that she had brought up from St. Peter at the Fen at the December past, the gown that her late mother had worn at the summer of 1810 at her last gentle hour at the parsonage south door. Mrs. Inchbald took the muslin gentle at her careful hand, and at the gentle care of a housekeeper of 26 years, she pressed it at the brick and pantile laundry of the south wing. The Easter Sunday morning of the 23rd of April, 1820, came up over Bramwell, in the cool, clear, pale yellow Lincolnshire spring sun, the Lincolnshire thrushes at the lower reed bed at their gentle Easter song, the brick and pantile village of Westwold in the Fen, gentle at the slope across the Welland Fen at the pale yellow Lincolnshire morning. Cecilia was at the north wing chamber at 9:30 in the fresh, cream and reed green, sprigged muslin half morning gown of her late mother Elspeth. At the bodice she had pinned, at her own gentle hand at the north wing dressing table, a sprig of early Lincolnshire fen primrose from the south bank of the Welland Fen, the first sprig of the Fenland spring of her own Lincolnshire ownership. The Bramwell pearls were at the gentle row at her throat, at Mrs. Inchbald's settled hand at the worn gold clasp at the nape. Mr. Yelverton brought up the Bramwell chaise at the south sweep at 10:30. Mrs. Inchbald, in her soft plum bombazine and her clean white linen cap, came up gentle beside Cecilia at the chaise. The chaise went down the south sweep at the slow tilt of 11, across the Welland Fen lane to the brick and pantile village of Westwold in the Fen, and up at the south porch of St. Botolph's at the slow tilt of 11:45. Reverend Fanshawe read the Easter service at the south chancel at his warm Lincolnshire gravity. The Bramwell pew at the south aisle was at Cecilia's gentle, careful seat, the green leather cowper at her careful hand at the third hymn, the Easter sun at the south aisle window at her own warm chestnut hair. The Fenland parish was gentle at the Easter pews, the Glendowers at the middle aisle, the Fanshaws of the vicarage at the second pew at the south aisle, the Wellands at the rear of the south aisle, the Bostons at the north aisle. The Easter service closed at the gentle Lincolnshire pace at the slow tilt of noon. Cecilia went down gentle from the Bramwell pew at the close of the service at her own careful pace, Mrs. Inchbald 3 paces at her hand. At the south porch at 20 past noon, in the pale yellow Lincolnshire spring sun at the brick and pantile porch arch, an unfamiliar Fenland gentleman stood at the warm gravity of a man who had been at Underwood Court these 8 years, since his late wife, Lady Selina's 3-year mourning had begun, and was at the south porch this Easter Sunday at his daughter Clarissa's settled wish. He was tall, lean upright at his 6'1" frame, his dark chestnut hair cut close at the nape with one streak of pure silver at the right temple, his warm hazel eyes very direct at the pale yellow Lincolnshire morning, the colour of a Lincolnshire fenreed at the autumn close, true warm fenreed gold, his gentle firm mouth at the warm careful Lincolnshire pace, his weathered fair Lincolnshire skin at the Easter sun, the Underwood earldom signet of a heron over 3 Fenland reeds at the ring at his right hand, in his honey fawn country morning coat over his plain cream waistcoat. He inclined gentle and deep at Cecilia and at Reverend Fanshawe at the south porch. Reverend Fanshawe, at his gentle warm Lincolnshire gravity at the south porch, made the careful introduction at his gentle Fenland pace. Miss Radcliffe, Lord Roland Underwood, 4th Earl of Stamford, of Underwood Court at Stamford, 8 miles inland. Lord Roland is the lay patron of the Westwold living and the standing improver of the Westwold Parish School these 11 years past. Lord Roland inclined warm and gentle at Cecilia at the brick and pantile porch arch. His voice, when he spoke at the warm, careful Lincolnshire pace of a man at his home fen, was of the gentle Lincolnshire register of a man of 37 years, at the settled hour of his late wife's 3-year mourning, newly eased to its half-mourning at his daughter Clarissa's settled wish. Miss Radcliffe. I had known Dr. Bramwell since the Lincolnshire autumn of 1812 at the careful improving work of the north windows of the Westwold Parish School, which he had taken at his settled hand at the same year I had taken the lay patronage of the Westwold living. I was moved at the November of the year past at his bereavement. I have come over from Underwood Court at this Easter Sunday, at my late Lady Selina's 3-year mourning, being newly eased at my daughter Clarissa's settled wish, and at the gentle asking of Reverend Fanshawe at the Easter week. Cecilia, at her gentle warm Lincolnshire composure at the south porch in the cream and reed green sprigged muslin and the Bramwell pearls at her throat, inclined her chestnut head, gentle at his bow. Lord Roland, I am moved by your kindness in coming over. Reverend Fanshawe walked them gentle to the lych gate at the south side of the churchyard at the slow tilt of 12 o'clock. Lord Roland took his careful leave at 20 past noon. One further gentle bow at Cecilia, one gentle incline at Reverend Fanshawe, and went gentle to his Underwood Court chaise at the Welland Fen Lane. Cecilia walked back along the Welland Fen Lane to Bramwell House at her gentle Lincolnshire pace, Mrs. Inchbald 3 paces at her gentle hand, the Easter Sunday afternoon sun, warm at the brick and pantile walls of the lane. At the south door of Bramwell at 12:30, she paused one careful moment at the brick and pantile arch and looked south across the Welland Fen to the pale yellow Lincolnshire afternoon over the brick and pantile village of Westwold in the fen at the further slope. The Fenland thrushes at the lower reed bed, still at their gentle Easter song, the first sprigs of fen primrose at the south bank of the Welland. Fen gentle in the Easter sun, sensible at her own careful hour of an alteration in her own Lincolnshire life, that she would not at the present hour attempt to name. The cool, clear, pale yellow Lincolnshire Easter Sunday afternoon at Bramwell House closed at the south porch in warm kind Fenland equanimity. Saturday the 6th of May, 1820 came in over the Welland Fen in the warm pale gold of a Lincolnshire late spring afternoon, and at 3 o'clock the carriage from Underwood Court turned in at the worn brick gate piers of Bramwell House. Mr. Yelverton, who had been at the south door from 3:15, opened the door himself, in his worn black butler's tailcoat with its brass Bramwell buttons. Lord Roland Underwood, 4th Earl of Stamford, descended first, tall, lean upright at 6'1", dark chestnut hair cut close at the nape, with its one streak of pure silver at the right temple, warm hazel eyes the colour of a Lincolnshire fen reed at the autumn close, gentle firm mouth, in honey-fawn country morning coat over cream waistcoat. He turned at the carriage step and lifted down his daughter himself. The Honourable Clarissa Underwood was 8 years old that May, and slight for 8. Her soft auburn brown hair was plaited in 2 long braids tied at the ends with reed green ribbons. Her warm hazel eyes were her father's exactly. Her mouth was gentle, and she wore a pale cream and reed green sprigged muslin morning frock with a clean white linen tucker at the throat. She kept her gloved hand in her father's all the way up the south steps. After them came Lady Octavia Lanesborough, 8 and 30, dark chestnut hair pinned smooth under a fine lace cap, warm hazel eyes her brother's, kind mouth, slender at 5'6", in soft amber silk morning gown with a white lace fichu at the throat, and Sir Percival, 4 and 40, sturdy at 5'10", soft mid-brown hair, warm blue-grey eyes, a kind open Lincolnshire face, in olive drab country coat. He gave Lady Octavia his arm up the south steps. Mrs. Inchbald received them at the south library door in her plum bombazine half-mourning with the white lawn fichu, her soft iron-grey hair clean beneath the white linen cap, her warm hazel eyes very direct. My lord, Lady Octavia, Sir Percival, Miss Clarissa, Miss Radcliffe is at the south library. Cecilia was at the south library hearth. She had risen at the carriage wheels on the fen road. She was in her plum and cream half-mourning, with the clean white linen collar, her soft, warm chestnut hair pinned smooth at the nape, the careful hazel of her eyes very direct, and she came forward 2 paces and gave her warm, careful bow. My lord, Lady Octavia, Sir Percival. She inclined to the little girl, and her mouth softened. Miss Clarissa, you are very welcome at Bramwell. Clarissa looked up at her in the 8-year-old gravity of her warm hazel eyes, and replied in a warm Lincolnshire lisp, Thank you, Miss Radcliffe. Papa has told me about the South Library. Lord Rowland's eyes warmed at his daughter's gentle voice, and he turned them to Cecilia across the South Library hearth in one warm, careful moment that Mrs. Inchbald at the South Library door observed without comment. Tea was brought in by Mr. Yelverton at 3:30 on the Bramwell silver of 78 pieces. Mrs. German had set up a plate of warm Lincolnshire fen cakes and the cool, pale yellow loaf cake of the warm, careful Westwold recipe. The talk in the South Library that warm, careful afternoon kept to the gentle Lincolnshire register of a first formal call. Lord Rowland had known Dr. Hugh Bramwell. He told Cecilia at the South Hearth, since 1812, the year his late father, the 3rd Earl, had sat with Dr. Bramwell at the Westwold Parish School subscription dinner at the Bramwell Arms Inn. Dr. Bramwell had been, Lord Rowland said in his warm, careful Lincolnshire voice, the considered improver of the Westwold Parish School these 8 years past, the man who had given the Fen Village School its second master and its Greek primer and its modest library of 37 volumes. He spoke of the school in his letters to my late father, Miss Radcliffe, and to me once or twice at the rectory at Westwold. He was a warm, careful improver of a modest thing, and a warm, careful improver is what a Fen Village School requires. Cecilia inclined her gentle head. My godfather's hand at the Westwold School was warm and careful to the last, my lord. Reverend Fanshawe has set it out for me at the parish books, and the warm, careful hand has been a gentle gift to the Fen Village girls of Westwold these 8 years. It was at this gentle moment in the warm, careful Lincolnshire afternoon that Clarissa Underwood, who had wandered 4 paces from her father's chair to the South Library mantel, looked up at the worn brown leather Cowper's Olney hymns set there in its old fen-spotted binding, with Dr. Bramwell's careful italic marginalia at the forage. "Papa," she said softly, "the worn brown book at the mantel." Lord Roland turned. "Miss Radcliffe?" Cecilia rose. "It was my godfather's, my lord. The cowper of his King's College rooms. Mr. Yelverton brought it down from the chestnut window press at his death." She lifted it gentle and put it into Lord Roland's hand. His marginalia is in his careful Cambridge italic at the forage of every hymn. Clarissa took one further gentle pace and asked Cecilia in her warm Lincolnshire lisp, "Miss Radcliffe, might Papa read it to me one warm afternoon at the South Library?" Cecilia bent her gentle head to the 8-year-old face and gave her warm, careful answer in gentle, gracious composure. "Miss Clarissa, he may. And I should be glad of the gentle hour at the South Library when he does." Lord Roland's warm hazel eyes met Cecilia's across the South Library hearth for one warm, careful moment. He turned the worn cowper at his hand and read aloud, in the warm, careful Lincolnshire register of a father at his daughter's wish, the opening couplet of Hymn the Third. Clarissa stood at his knee, with her gentle gloved hand at his cuff, and her warm hazel eyes lifted to Cecilia's at the second line. Cecilia inclined her gentle head and gave the child her warm, gentle Lincolnshire bow. Lady Octavia, who had observed her brother and the schoolmistress from her seat at the second sash window, said in her warm Lincolnshire voice, "Miss Radcliffe, your godfather's hand at the forge is the hand of a warm, careful man. The Bramwell Library has been very gentle to him." Cecilia inclined her gentle head. "Lady Octavia, it has been the warm keeping of Mrs. Inchbald and Mr. Yelverton. I have done no more than dust the forage." The carriage from Underwood Court took its leave at 4:30. After it had passed the brick gate piers, Mrs. Inchbald set down the tea things at the South Library writing table and said in her warm, direct Lincolnshire voice, "His lordship is a very warm, careful gentleman, Miss Cecilia, and the little girl is a warm, gentle Lincolnshire creature." "She is, Mrs. Inchbald." Mrs. Inchbald set the cool, pale yellow loaf cake under its linen and said no more. Through the warm Tuesday afternoons of May and the warm Tuesday afternoons of June, Lord Roland came at 1:00 from Underwood Court to the South Library reading hour. He stayed the warm hour to 2. Mrs. Inchbald was at the South Library door with her keys. Mrs. Hatherton, lately back from Lincoln for the warm May fortnight, to keep her old pupil company, sat at the second sash window with her gentle sewing 3 paces off. They read together from the worn cowper. Lord Roland took the right-hand wing chair at the south hearth, and Cecilia the reading lectern at the south sash window, and they read the Olney hymns with Dr. Bramwell's careful italic marginalia. The warm Cambridge italic at the forage of Hymn the 14th gave Cecilia a gentle turn at the second Tuesday, for her godfather had marked the third stanza at its margin in the warm, careful hand of a Lincolnshire reed in the warm September wind. On the warm Tuesday of the 23rd of May, at the third stanza of Cowper's Olney Hymn the 14th, Cecilia at the reading lectern caught Lord Roland's warm hazel eyes upon her at the line about the gentle Lincolnshire reed in the warm September wind. She looked away one warm moment too quickly and bent her gentle head to the worn cowper at her hand. Mrs. Inchbald, at the South Library door, observed the moment without comment. She had not, in her 26 years at the Fen parsonage and the Lincoln schoolroom, allowed herself to consider what it might be to be looked at in that warm, careful way. She had not, at present, any settled opinion of the matter, except that the worn cowper at her hand had grown to be a different book at the third stanza than it had been at the first, and that the warm hazel of his eyes at the South Library hearth was a colour she had not, at 26 years of Fen Sundays, learnt to give a proper name to. Through the warm Wednesday afternoons of May and the warm Wednesday afternoons of June, Lord Roland rode over from Underwood Court at 2:30 on his bay mare. He walked the home fen pasture with Cecilia for the warm half-hour to 3. Mrs. Hatherton kept 3 paces behind them at the gentle fen pasture path. They spoke, at the home fen pasture, of Dr. Bramwell's botanical fen-reed observations, the worn Greek-bound notebook of 47 years of fen-reed records that Mr. Glendower had kept at the steward's office for him. They spoke of Lady Octavia's old walled garden at Underwood Court that had not been planted in 3 years for the want of a careful hand, and of the gentle honeysuckle Lord Rowland's late mother had set there in 1798, that had run wild over the south wall in the warm seasons since. "My sister Octavia," Lord Rowland said one warm Wednesday at the fen pasture stile, "is at Lanesborough most of the year now. The Underwood walled garden has been the gentle wish of her warm, careful summer letters for 3 years past, and I have not had the warm, careful hand at Underwood to give it to her." Cecilia inclined her gentle head. "It is a warm, careful wish, my lord. A walled garden takes a warm, careful hand." "It does, Miss Radcliffe." On a warm Wednesday in mid-May, Clarissa came up with her father once. She had begged it of him, Lord Rowland said with the warm, gentle, particular smile of a single father at his daughter's earnest wish. At the fen pasture stile, while Mrs. Hatherton waited the 4 warm paces behind, Clarissa took Cecilia's gloved hand in both of her gloved ones and announced in her warm 8-year-old Lincolnshire gravity, "Miss Radcliffe, you are to come to Underwood Court soon. There is my own old wooden Underwood doll's house at the warm south nursery, and I am to show it to you at the warm afternoon." Cecilia bent gentle and warm to the 8-year-old face and gave Clarissa her gloved promise. "Miss Clarissa, I shall come, and I shall be very glad of the warm, gentle hour at the south nursery when I do." Clarissa's warm hazel eyes, her father's exactly, went warm at Cecilia's gentle answer, and her gentle mouth softened, and she ran 4 paces back to her father at the fen pasture path with the warm, gentle skip of an 8-year-old Lincolnshire Fenland girl. Lord Rowland's warm hazel eyes met Cecilia's across the gentle fen pasture stile for one warm, careful moment that Mrs. Hatherton, at the 4 paces, observed without comment. Late in the warm month of June, on the warm Wednesday of the 28th, Lord Rowland asked of Cecilia at the South Library reading hour, "Miss Radcliffe, would you be at home to me at the South Parlour on Saturdays through the warm month of July, at Mrs. Inchbald's customary Bramwell chaperonage?" Cecilia gave her warm, careful answer in the warm, careful gravity of a Lincolnshire schoolmistress of 26 years. "My lord, I should." Through the warm Saturdays of July, Lord Rowland came at 3 o'clock to the South Parlour and stayed the warm 2 hours to 5. Mrs. Hatherton kept her warm 3 paces at the South Parlour sash window with her gentle sewing. Mrs. Inchbald carried the tea things in at 3:30, and the cool, pale yellow loaf cake. At 3 o'clock on the warm Saturday of the 5th of August, 1820, Lord Rowland Underwood, 4th Earl of Stamford, knelt at the South Parlour rug of Bramwell House. In his right hand he held the worn green leather commonplace book of his late father, the 3rd Earl. The warm, gentle book his father had kept at the Westwold Parish School subscription dinner of 1810, in which Dr. Bramwell's careful Cambridge italic at the page margin had set out the warm Lincolnshire courtesies of the Fen Village School. "Miss Radcliffe," he said, his warm hazel eyes were at hers across the South Parlour rug. His warm, careful Lincolnshire voice was gentle and warm and very direct. "I had not, when my late father first knew Dr. Bramwell at the Westwold Parish School subscription of 1810, foreseen this, that the worn green leather commonplace book of his warm, careful Lincolnshire hand should come to be the warm token of a Saturday afternoon at this parlour rug 10 years on. I have loved you, with what dignity I could, and with what warm, careful patience, the 4 months at this house have required of me, since the south porch of St. Botolph's at Westwold on Easter Sunday, the 23rd of April, 1820. When Reverend Fanshawe made us known at the warm south porch in the warm pale gold of the Lincolnshire Easter afternoon, and you gave me your warm gentle Lincolnshire bow at the south step, I am asking now, on no other ground than that I have loved you at the warm, careful pace your 8 months at this house have allowed me, to do me the honour of becoming my countess. You have known me too short a time to be in love with me yet. I shall not press you on that. I shall ask only that you consider the question at your own time, and if your warm, careful answer is yes, I shall do my best at Underwood Court to deserve it. If your warm, careful answer is no, my Tuesday and Wednesday and Saturday calls at this house shall continue undiminished at the warm pace they have lately kept, and the question shall never be raised again. Cecilia at the south parlour rug looked down at the warm hazel of his eyes for one warm, careful Lincolnshire moment. Then she gave him her warm, gentle Lincolnshire answer in the gentle, warm composure of a parson's daughter of 26 years. Lord Rowland, I shall. She inclined her gentle head and gave him one further, warm, careful sentence. I shall. And I should be glad of the gentle Tuesday hour we have had at the South Library to continue, by Lady Octavia's settled wish, even after the wedding bells of Westwold. Lord Rowland kept his place at the south parlour rug one warm, careful moment longer. His warm hazel eyes were at hers, and the warm, gentle Lincolnshire register of his voice had softened to a warm, careful gravity. My dear Miss Radcliffe, I had not, until this gentle Saturday minute at the parlour rug, foreseen the gentle Lincolnshire quiet at the close of the Tuesday hour shall be the gentle candle of my own Underwood evenings to come. I am very gratified by your warm, careful answer. He rose from the south parlour rug and gave Cecilia his warm, careful hand, and she gave him hers in the warm, gentle Lincolnshire fashion of a parson's daughter of 26. Mrs. Hatherton, at the warm 3 paces at the south sash window, kept her gentle sewing in her warm, careful lap. Clarissa was brought down from the south nursery by Mrs. Inchbald at 3:30. She had been at the warm, worn wooden Underwood doll's house Mrs. Inchbald had set up for her at the warm south window of the nursery, and her warm hazel eyes were warm, and her plaited auburn-brown hair was a gentle unstrand. Lord Rowland bent at her warm, gentle height, and told her, in the warm, careful Lincolnshire register of a father at his daughter's warm, earnest wish, that Miss Radcliffe had given him her warm, careful Lincolnshire answer. Clarissa Underwood looked up at Cecilia in her warm 8-year-old gravity, and gave her warm, careful Lincolnshire answer in her warm Lincolnshire lisp. Papa, I should be very glad of a stepmother at Underwood who reads the Cowper at the warm, careful pace you read it at the South Library at this house. Lord Rowland's warm hazel eyes settled gentle on his daughter's warm auburn-brown head, and his warm, careful mouth softened, and he laid his warm, careful hand at Clarissa's warm, gentle shoulder. Cecilia bent gentle and warm to the 8-year-old face, and gave Clarissa her warm, careful answer. Miss Clarissa, I shall read the Cowper at the warm pace your papa reads it, at the South Library at this house, and at the South Nursery at Underwood, all the warm afternoons of our gentle Lincolnshire years to come. Clarissa Underwood's warm hazel eyes, her father's exactly, softened, and her gentle mouth softened, and she put her warm gloved hand in Cecilia's warm careful one at the south parlour rug. The banns were read at St. Botolph's at Westwold in the Fen by Reverend Octavius Fanshawe on the warm Sundays of the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th of August, 1820. No impediment was offered at any of the 3 readings. The wedding was held at 10 o'clock on the warm, pale gold morning of Saturday the 9th of September, 1820, at St. Botolph's at Westwold in the Fen, by Reverend Fanshawe. Mr. Geoffrey Glenister, lately come down from Lincoln's Inn, gave the bride away at the warm south chancel. Mrs. Walpole, the aunt, who had come down from Stamford the warm Tuesday before, stood as matron of honour at Cecilia's left side, in soft mid-blue silk morning gown with white lawn fichu. Lady Octavia Lanesborough was at the front pew with Clarissa Underwood on her lap. Sir Percival Lanesborough was at Lord Rowland's right side, at the chancel rail in his olive-drab country coat. The Westwold parish and the Underwood household were in the back pews of the warm Fen Village church. The bride wore cream Lincolnshire muslin morning gown, made by Mrs. Tibbins, the Westwold village dressmaker. At her bodice were pinned a sprig of late-summer Lincolnshire fen honeysuckle from the home fen pasture, and one white and cream rose from Lady Octavia's old walled garden at Underwood Court in the warm, customary Westwold fashion. The Bramwell family pearls, 78 years old, from Dr. Bramwell's grandfather's bride at Westwold in the Fen, were at her throat. She wore long ivory silk gloves of Mrs. Tibbins's careful making, and beneath her bodice, in gentle filial remembrance, she wore her late mother Elspeth's silver locket of 1788. The wedding breakfast was held at the south dining room at Bramwell House. Mrs. Jermyn had set out the cool, pale yellow loaf cake of the Westwold recipe, and the warm Lincolnshire fen cakes and the Bramwell family silver of 78 pieces. Mr. Yelverton kept at the south sideboard. Mrs. Inchbald kept at the south library door with her keys. The Westwold parish and the Underwood household sat the warm 2 hours to 1 o'clock. If you have stayed with me to the close of this story, I should be glad of one small word from you in the comments below. Tell me the county or the country you are listening from this evening, and one quiet kindness you have lately received that you have not yet had the chance to repay. If this story has been a comfort to your hour, do press the small bell beside the subscribe ribbon at this channel, so that the next Whispers of Love story shall find you in its turn. Until then, be at your ease, and at your candle, and at your hour. Whispers of Love. Mr. Glendower continued at the fen pasture. Mrs. Inchbald kept the housekeeper's keys at Bramwell House. The customary Lady Day quarter-day went forward at Mr. Glenister's hand at the South Library writing table. Mr. Yelverton lit the South Library fire at 5 each evening. The 36 unsent letters of Dr. Bramwell were set in their Greek-bound testamentary box at the South Library mantel beside the worn Cowper's Olney hymns. Bramwell House was let to the new vicar of St. Botolph's by Lady Stamford's settled arrangement at the customary parish rate. Underwood Court received its new mistress in the autumn. Clarissa Underwood took to her stepmother in the warm, gentle Lincolnshire way of an 8-year-old Fenland girl. Outside, the Lincolnshire fen sky turned the warm, pale gold colour of an autumn reed bed at the close of day. There are stories that begin with a kiss. There are stories that begin with a vow. There are stories that begin with a knock, and stories that begin with a hired post-chaise, and stories that begin with a will, or a parish ledger, or a sealed letter, or a holograph signed in a Cambridge bachelor's careful italic. And there are, gentle, longer in the asking, of the most warm, careful patience in the answering, stories that begin with a King's College testamentary letter, sealed in red lily and crown wax at the small Fellows' writing table at the chestnut window at the Fellows building under the riverside chestnut tree at King's, carried up to Lincolnshire by the Provost's covering note, and forwarded to a small Lincoln schoolroom on the cool, clear, pale yellow Wednesday afternoon of the 24th of November, 1819, by an old college bachelor of 77 years, to a young schoolmistress of 26 who had never known the godfather who had loved her at the chestnut window of King's all the warm Cambridge years of her warm, small Lincolnshire life, and who, on the cool, pale yellow Wednesday afternoon of that letter at the small parlour writing table at Mrs. Hatherton's reading school at Lincoln, took up her warm, careful pen and gave Mr. Geoffrey Glenister of Lincoln's Inn her warm, careful Lincolnshire reply, and who, at the warm Wednesday of the 8th of December at the chambers of No. 8 Old Square, signed the warm small papers of acceptance at the warm scholars' writing table, and who, on the warm Sunday afternoon of the 12th of December, came up to Bramwell House at Westwold in the Fen and was received at the south door by Mr. Yelverton and Mrs. Inchbald and Mrs. Jermyn and Mr. Glendower in the warm Lincolnshire fashion of a careful Fenland household, and who, on the warm Wednesday of the 19th of January, saw Mr. Tobias Cresswell's Lincoln Cotton Merchants 1812 loan claim defeated by Mr. Glenister at the South Library writing table at the warm, careful settled receipt of 1813, and who, on the warm Wednesday afternoon of the 22nd of March, opened her godfather's Greek-bound testamentary box at the Chestnut Window Press and found the 36 unsent letters of his careful Cambridge italic, and at the 7th birthday letter of May 1800 wept the one warm Lincolnshire tear of her 26 years, and who, on the warm Easter Sunday of the 23rd of April, was made known at the south porch of St. Botolph's by Reverend Fanshawe to Lord Roland Underwood, 4th Earl of Stamford, and who, on the warm Saturday of the 5th of August at the South Parlour Rug, gave him her warm, careful Lincolnshire answer, and who, on the warm Saturday of the 9th of September at St. Botolph's, took his warm, careful hand at the chancel rail. And so the curate's daughter became the 4th Countess of Stamford in the gentle, warm Lincolnshire fashion the Bramwell family Bible kept in its careful Cambridge italic at the South Library writing table all the days of its standing.